Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku was Endeavor's nephew? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanf. What are you talking about, Deku? Kaken sneers down at him from the jungle gym. Garganot is way cooler than Great Waller. He could kick Wallers but any day of the week. His pair of cronies, there are always at least two, though they tended to be swapped out from year to year, snicker. Izuku pouts, his cheeks puffing in annoyance. What are those two laughing for? They probably had no idea who Kaken and he are even talking about. I'm not saying Great Waller's a better fighter. I'm saying Garganot can only fight at his best when she's there to protect the civilians. He wouldn't be as good a hero if she wasn't there. I think she's really cool. You lame-ass nerd. What good is a hero who can't stop the villains? If she protects all those civilians there, but the villain gets away, they'll just go on to hurt different people later. Izuku eyes widen. It's a really good point and not one he's considered before. Kaken really is amazing. I didn't think of that. No shit. But if she's there then other heroes can focus on capturing the villains, so she's still helping do that too. You fuckwit, are you trying to pick a fight with me? Before he can protest, there's a blast inches from his face, rattling his brain in his skull and leaving him momentarily blind and deaf. It's long enough for him to lose his grip on the metal bars and tumble backward, knocking his chin and knee on the way down before landing with a breath-stealing whump on his back. There's not enough air to yelp, but his eyes fill with tears at the sudden bombardment of pain. A second later, there's another whump as Kaken leaps down beside him, followed by the sound of the other boys scrambling down more clumsily. What's wrong with you? What did you fall for? That wasn't even a firecracker. Kaken complains. Izuku very much wants to tell him it was definitely a firecracker, and what did he think was going to happen setting it off an inch from his face? But even if he weren't still struggling to breath between the fall and the sobs, he knows he wouldn't say it. If he did, Kaken would take it as a challenge to show him the difference. He always took everything as a challenge. Sometimes Izuku thinks it's because nothing challenges him. Not homework, not sports, not his classmates, not even his teachers. Kaken wants a challenge and he wishes he could give him one, but he can't, so he also wishes his friend were more reasonable. Stop it, you're not hurt. He insists unreasonably. There's blood on his knee and chin where he hit the bars, and his head and back throb hotly where he landed. He's bruised and bloodied and being scowled at as if it's his fault. The unfairness of it makes him sob harder. Kaken's expression scrunches in annoyance. Fine. Just sit there and cry then, you big baby. Where are you going? He asks frantically as the irritated boy starts to stomp away. Somewhere I don't have to listen to your blubbering. The other boys snicker. Shut up, assholes. Your stupid laughing isn't any less annoying. They stop snickering but follow as Kaken leaves, not even looking back as they make their way across the park. Izuku tries to stand and follow too but immediately sinks down. It does hurt whatever Kaken might think, and as much as he hates to be left behind, he can't follow yet either. It's several minutes sitting helplessly on the spongy playground flooring before he's able to stand and limp over to the water fountain to wash the blood off his face and knee. By then the other boys have disappeared. In no state to go looking for them, he lets out a dejected sigh and heads home. The walk is slow and gives him too much time to think. He wishes he had handled all that better. He'll be 10 in a few months and really shouldn't be sobbing like a toddler over a couple of scraps and bruises. It's not like he hasn't had plenty of those over the years. Kaken has always been a rough and rowdy kid, and Izuku has always followed after him. After all this time together, shouldn't some of his friends' toughness have rubbed off on him? Shouldn't he be more resilient to pain? It doesn't make any sense. Kaken, who's athletic and strong, doesn't get hurt often but still doesn't cry when he does. Then there's Izuku, who can't go a day without tripping over himself or getting in a scuffle and losing at recess and crying about it. Even just teasing will set him off, and he really should be used to that by now. He needs to be tougher. Even if he didn't plan on becoming a pro hero, he needs to be tougher than he is. Sooner or later, Kaken will get truly fed up and leave him behind for good. But how? He knows you have to exercise to get stronger, but how did you get tougher? Maybe the internet would have some advice. Maybe some pro-heroes had some advice. There are always articles out there with heroes giving advice about something or another, whether it is exercising or what to do if you encounter a villain. What if All Might has something to say? How cool would that be? His injuries are half forgotten by the time he steps through his front door, his thoughts racing after more interesting things like if there are quirks that can stop you from feeling pain and whether or not All Might knows how to skateboard. He's so distracted, he doesn't immediately notice the pair of men's dress shoes resting beside his mother's, nor the solemn black umbrella hanging next to his. "I'm home," he calls out, kicking off his shoes and dropping his backpack. He steps out of the entryway, expecting to see his mother in the kitchen, starting on dinner or checking her email. But it's not his mother standing at the counter. Instead, a tall man with bright curly red hair and cold blue eyes glares at him. He almost screams. "Izuku," comes his mom's familiar voice a moment before she steps out of her room. He turns his wide, startled eyes towards her and shakily points to the stranger in their kitchen. She grimaces, straining to keep her expression light. "Don't worry, Izuku. It's only your father." His head snaps back to where the man is already turned away to focus on assembling a cup of coffee and pays him no further mind. He takes in his curly red hair. Why had he always assumed it was black? The faint scattering of freckles, the broad shoulders he could only dream of growing into. None of it is familiar. He tries to pull some semblance of a memory to compare this man to, but it's entirely blank. Midoriya Hisashi had gone abroad for business when he was 3 and hadn't returned since. If there had been phone calls or birthday cards, they had stopped after he turned 4, and his mother had purged his photographs from their mantle and picture albums. For the last 5 years, his father has been nothing more than a name on his school records and a monthly check in the mail. Why is he here now? He lost his job, Inko whispers to her son later that night, after a dinner where no one said a single word to each other. So, he's come back to Japan to search for work. He'll be gone as soon as he finds it. She hates herself for having to explain to him like this, but she hates Hisashi twice as much for making it necessary. There is no way to sugarcoat it, to suggest that Hisashi really did love either of them anymore when he hasn't made contact in years and is still trying to avoid it while they're standing in the same room. She's not going to insult Izuku's intelligence by insisting he believe in fairy tales. Her mother had done that for Inko's father and stepfather both, and all it had done was convince Inko she couldn't rely on her mother any more than she could her mother's husbands. She dreads his questions, his inevitable tears, his heartbreak. But Izuku is more resilient than she gives him credit for. There's no why me? Or why not me? There's no sobbing or wishes for things that aren't. Instead, there's just a look of confusion. Why is he here? Izuku asks quietly. He obviously doesn't want to be. And isn't that a kick in the gut? That unquestioned acceptance that they are unwanted, but not why they were sought out in the first place? She tries to smile reassuringly at him, but it takes far too long for her to come up with an answer. She sighs, opts for the truth. He doesn't have any income coming in, so he doesn't want to spend money on a hotel. He's been paying the rent since we moved here, so she hasn't loved her husband in years, but for both her and her son's sake she has chosen not to be bitter towards him. She had seen what bitterness had done to her father, how it had poisoned his relationships. But it is hard not to resent him while he shoves his selfishness and cruelty in their faces. I don't like it either. I should have just divorced him years ago. You shouldn't have to deal with him acting like a sullen teenager. You deserve better than anything he ever gave you. She hugs him tightly, aching for him. He hugs her too, just as tightly, but when she pulls back the confusion is still there. The confusion and the doubt. Izuku believes his mom. He doesn't doubt that her irritation with his father is genuine and that she views him as being in the wrong. But he also can't help wondering what he was like before Izuku was diagnosed as quirkless. He had to have been different. Why else would his mom have married him in the first place? If Izuku had had a quirk, or if he simply didn't exist, would they have been together now? What if he disappeared today? Would his parents be able to make amends and fall back in love? Try for another child? He doesn't ask any of it. Doesn't dare. He's beyond scared that if he does, it will be just like before when all she could say was, "I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry." It's not his fault. He knows, logically, it's not his fault he was born without a quirk. But it doesn't change the fact that so much unhappiness seems centered around him, regardless. A week passes and nothing changes. His father is still very much there and not there. The first time Izuku hears his father's voice is when he answers his phone at the dinner table, a surprisingly mature and resonant baritone that doesn't match up with his curly hair and freckles. He's never up before Izuku leaves for school, but at night he hogs the bath until the water is tepid and watches television into the small hours of the morning. Sometimes his mom brings her futon to his room and sleeps with him for the night. He doesn't tell her he prefers it when she does. He has a hard time falling asleep with the looming presence in the apartment. School is both easier and harder. He finds himself looking forward to the escape from the apartment, the noise, the color, and predictability of it all. Even the teasing and scuffles lack their usual sting, more annoyances than hurts, and he wonders vaguely if somehow he got tougher without realizing it. It's harder because he can't concentrate. Not when the teacher is talking, not while playing basketball in gym, and not when Kaken asks him to pass the salt during lunch. "Hey, wake up. Didn't you hear me? What's wrong with you now, Deku?" He snarls in his ear, startling him out of his sleepy haze. Straightening in his chair and looking around frantically, Izuku finds his friend glaring death at him. "Sorry I spaced out. You've been a fucking astronaut all week. Your mom dying or something?" Izuku flinches, and Kaken's eyes widen. "She better fucking not be. Or else what? You'd explode her?" He thinks crankily but doesn't say. "No, she's fine. Just, neighbors have been blaring the TV at night is all. We haven't been able to sleep very well. Then call the cops on their shitty asses?" "Yeah, okay," he says because there's no point in arguing over something that isn't actually happening. He could tell him the truth, that his dad had shown up after 6 years and still acted as if his son didn't exist, but sympathy has never been Kaken's strong point. If he didn't shout Izuku's private family business in the middle of class, he might storm the Midoriya apartment and shout his righteous indignation at Hisashi, cause some sort of property damage, and then leave Izuku and his mom to deal with the fallout. Not helpful. Whatever, nerd, pass the fucking salt already. Mostly, Izuku just hopes it will all be over before anyone else finds out what is happening. That his dad, no, Hisashi, will find his new job and disappear soon, and this will just be a bad couple of weeks in an otherwise perfectly ordinary year. That night as the Midoriyas sit down to dinner together, his mother breaks the silence for the first time. "I'll be working a longer shift starting on Monday," she tells them. "Dinner will be an hour later than usual." Izuku feels his already questionable appetite evaporate. If his mom is late getting home, he would be alone with Hisashi for an hour, maybe 2 every day. To date, his father has done nothing that suggests he's dangerous, but it is also true he's not felt completely safe in the apartment since he showed up. He always seems to be on the verge of losing his temper. Like now, as the man's hard blue eyes look up from his phone to settle on his mom. Nothing further is said, but Izuku's eyes fixate on the other's hand tightening around his phone. Had he expected to be consulted? Was the later dinner somehow an inconvenience? Did he not want to be alone with his son any more than Izuku wished to be alone with him? He doesn't know what's going on in the man's head and is offered no further clue. That night his mom sleeps in his room and explains further. "If Hisashi and I divorce," she whispers, "I will have to start working full-time to support us. Your father's name is on the lease, so we might also have to move." And suddenly he knows this isn't just going to be a few bad weeks. This is going to change things at home, perhaps even between him and his mom. They might move to another neighborhood, which might mean a new school. And if his mom is gone more, he is going to have to learn to take care of himself more, and they might not be able to afford as many unnecessary expenses, like his All Might collectibles. As soon as he thinks it, he feels selfish and petty. How can he worry about toys when his mom might have to reorganize her entire life to support them alone? His mom had never been very adventurous, couldn't even stand to watch hero videos online with him or try spicy food, so what must she be going through now? He forces himself to smile, the big All Might one he knows she likes. "You're amazing, Mom." Just tell me what to do and I'll help. Tears prick the corner of her eyes, and she pulls him into a tight hug. You're such a good boy, Izuku. My sweet, darling boy. He wants to feel good at her words, to let her love wash over him. But he's not a little kid anymore, and as nice as these things are to hear, he can't help but notice there's no suggestions for how he could be useful. Right now, they needed useful more than they needed good or sweet. His smile remains plastered on even after she pulls away and wipes her eyes. For now at least, he can put on a brave face and not whine like a child about how unfair it all is. He already knows life is unfair. He had since he was 4. The next day he decides he has to tell Kakin about his dad. He might be mad Izuku didn't tell him the truth at first, but he will be positively apoplectic if he finds out on his own. He decides to wait until after school, hoping to avoid a scene, but it backfires when he's so nervous and distracted again. Kakin smacks him upside the back of the head at recess. Where's your brain today, nerd? Never mind, where's it been all week? Don't give me that neighbor bullshit either. Izuku flinches and rubs his head. It wasn't a playful slap. Kakin obviously has him at least partially figured out already. There's no point in trying to put it off. Can we talk somewhere else? His friend doesn't move. Instead, he throws a glare over his shoulder at his 2 minions, who catch the hint and skulk off to join some other classmates playing soccer. Kakin crosses his arms. Alright, so spill. Dad came back. Despite the situation, Izuku almost laughs at the sheer look of surprise that crosses his friend's face. He might as well have told him his dad was running for prime minister. Fuck, yeah. Pretty much, he agrees with a sigh. He doesn't drag out the humiliation of being ignored in his own home or that he's genuinely afraid to go back alone today. There are plenty of other less personally painful particulars to offer instead. I think Mom is going to get divorced and we might have to move. She's already started picking up more hours at work. For once, Kakin doesn't have a ready reply. Well, good for her, I guess. She doesn't need that dead weight. Izuku throat tightens. He knows Kakin means Hisashi, but he's called Izuku that same thing when useless got redundant. He still has no idea what he can do to help his mom out, and the reminder of being a burden makes him regret saying anything after all. You think he'll try to get shared custody? His friend asks, stabbing yet another sore spot in his already tender self-esteem. No. Kakin just stares at him for a long moment, clearly wanting to ask more questions and equally certain he shouldn't. That, somehow, he's already bungled this conversation. For once, Izuku doesn't feel the need to reach out and attempt to bridge the misunderstanding. For once, he doesn't want to be a good boy and put someone else's feelings before his own. Let Kakin be curious or annoyed or disappointed. Kakin could live with not knowing. Izuku only wishes he could be that blessedly ignorant. He doesn't remember the rest of the school day. He can surmise the general activities and lessons based on what they had done previously, but nothing sticks. Had Sensei called on him? Had someone tripped him in the hall? What had his mother packed him for lunch? He just remembers dreading its end. But end it does, and he still doesn't know what to do with himself. So he heads home. Tells himself he's making a lot of fuss over nothing. He would walk through the door and be completely ignored just like before. All he has to do is go to his room and keep himself busy until his mom gets back. Do some homework, work on a hero analysis notebook, even just take a nap. So, that's what he does. He doesn't bother calling out a greeting, just slinks off to his room. Hisashi's looming presence appears and then disappears from the corner of his eye before he makes his escape. Even after he closes his door, dread lingers, and he props a chair underneath the doorknob. He tries to tell himself he's being stupid. His father is a jerk, not a serial killer. The chair stays. He tidies his room, does his homework, and tries to think up useful things he could do. Cooking and shopping might be a bit beyond him. He already did the dishes. Laundry maybe? Vacuuming? Every so often he hears a noise from the kitchen or a floorboard creaking in the hall and freezes like a rabbit, ears perked towards possible danger. His eyes train on his doorknob, waiting for it to jiggle. But it never does, and finally the hours tick off one after the other and his mom comes home. He peeks his head out to greet her. She looks tired but pleased with herself, a grocery bag in hand and her briefcase in the other. Welcome back, he says and just barely stops himself from throwing his arms around her. Sorry I'm late. I'm not used to the commute during rush hour and missed my stop. I picked up some curry on the way back. Sounds good. I'll take that, he offers eagerly. She gives him a pleased smile as she hands over the bag and makes her way to her bedroom to change out of her dress suit. Turning to carry his burden to the kitchen, he freezes as his eyes lock onto Hisashi. He's sitting at the dining room table, laptop perched in front of him, but his eyes aren't glued to the screen like usual. They're staring directly at Izuku, fierce and cold. It's the first time his father has acknowledged his existence in the room since he first arrived. What are you looking at? The words are at the tip of Izuku's tongue, venomously sharp, but he bites them back. He had thought he would be scared if Hisashi ever looked at him like this, and a part of him is, but a larger part is frustrated and resentful and indignant. How dare this man come into his home and ruin everything? If he didn't want to be part of this family, why couldn't he just have stayed away and left them alone? They don't need him here. They don't want him here. He turns away first, deciding to return the favor of the last week and ignore him. He putters in the kitchen, gathering dishes and unboxing the food until his mom returns. Together, they carry it all into the dining room and lay everything out. Hisashi has returned to glaring at his computer, so they leave his portion behind it to grow cold while they start on their own. They don't speak, they'll wait until tonight when they're alone, but Izuku and his mom share tentative smiles across the table. Together again, he starts to finally relax. Things are not okay. Not yet. But his mom had a plan, and eventually they would get back something like what they had before. Hisashi still hasn't so much as looked at the food when his phone goes off. Pulling it from his pocket, he carries it into the kitchen. Izuku and Inko pause in their meal, curiosity getting the better of them. Hello. I'm glad to hear back from you so quickly. Yes. If this is about my previous employer, no. Yes, I understand. Thank you for your consideration. Good evening. They both look away as Hisashi re-enters the dining room, continuing their meal as if nothing has happened. Izuku feels a sting of disappointment. It is, perhaps, too much to hope everything could be resolved with a phone call and a job that would take his father far away again. It takes a moment to realize Hisashi hasn't sat down but rather is hovering beside the table. His eyes widen as he sees his father is staring down at them, smoke pluming from his mouth. I bet you thought that was funny, Hisashi says. Izuku freezes. Inko freezes. Bet you feel so damn smug that you pick and choose how much you work on a whim, that you're making more money than me and putting the food on the table? His mother sets down her spoon and turns to look at him coolly. Izuku doesn't breathe. No one is laughing, she says. Hisashi throws himself across the table, sweeping food and dishes onto the floor. Izuku falls backwards in his chair and scrambles back in terror. But his father is already pulling himself upright and snarling at his wife, flames billowing from his mouth. You lying bitch. You fat, stupid cunt. You think I don't know what you think of me? That you hate me? I see how you both are around each other, whispering amongst yourselves and sharing looks you don't think I can see. You wish I was gone. That I didn't come back so you could live off my money without having to deal with me. I supported you in that waste of space for more than a decade and now you think you're better than me? That you don't need me anymore? The entire time he's rampaging, the flames pouring out of his mouth become larger, brighter until they're lapping at his collar and licking the line of his eyebrows. Izuku, cowering on the floor, irrationally notes that it's starting to singe his shirt, but his skin and hair look entirely unaffected. His mother doesn't move. She doesn't flinch. Her expression reveals nothing. No one is laughing, she repeats. It's the bravest thing Izuku's ever seen, and he's utterly terrified he's about ready to see his mother burned alive. For a second, the flames flare and dance and Hisashi's chest heaves with every furious breath. A deafening wail screams through the apartment. There's a collective flinch as the sound shocks them all out their runaway emotions. The smoke detector is going off. On the other side of the kitchen wall, someone starts pounding angrily and shouting something too muffled to understand. Hisashi takes another breath, swallowing his flames in one great gulp. His expression is still twisted with hate and rage, but now his eyes dart around him as if he's expecting to be attacked. He lets out one last snarl and storms out of the kitchen towards the entryway. They listen as he stomps about for a moment. Then the door slams. They're alone again. His mother bursts into tears. They both hug each other and cry what seem like buckets of tears, before rallying enough to deactivate the smoke alarm and clean up the mess. The dining room rug is stained beyond saving, but the dishware has all miraculously survived. They mop the floor, wash the dishes, and take out the trash within half an hour. The devastation turns out to be more superficial than either had thought. At least to their belongings. That night, his mother moves into his room. He gladly gives up his bed and makes space in his closet for her suits. Childish relief fills him at the thought of her being so close, and he would be embarrassed by it, except it's entirely reasonable now. He was afraid of Hisashi when he arrived, and now he knows that fear was justified. There is fire running in that man's blood, and not just the kind that comes from a quirk. That night they turn in early, not wanting to be up to face Hisashi when he returns. His mother doesn't even offer a token protest when he wedges his chair up beneath the doorknob. They're both tired, but it's hard to relax into sleep. He was right, Izuku says into the darkness of the room. Hisashi still hasn't returned, but even still the words are a whisper soft. We do want him gone. We don't want him here. His mother sighs sadly. All of that is his own fault. He's behaved terribly to both of us. He could have been a part of this family, but he chose to leave. He could have tried to make amends but hasn't. That's on him. Those are his decisions and his fault, whatever excuses he might want to give. Even that part about taking his money is less than half a truth. The full truth is he's ashamed. He knows he's behaved badly because he thought he would never have to face up to it, but now he's lost his job and has to come back and face the people he wronged. Then why does he ignore us and then shout at us? How does behaving even worse help anything? Well, it obviously doesn't, she says with a humorless laugh. He's still just trying to avoid the truth. He's trying to scare us into not pointing it out. It's strange to hear his mom talk like this about his father. He thinks he should be more offended on his behalf or more hurt by the blunt acknowledgement of Hisashi's rejection. But the sting is no sharper than the thoughtless condescension of the rest of society towards a quirkless child, and less so than Kaken's occasional cruel mockery. Hisashi has been such a non-entity his entirely life, Izuku finds it difficult to form any sort of significance to his cruelty. He's just a stranger he's somehow stuck with. It's scarier in some ways but also simpler. I thought you were really brave tonight, he says. Like a hero. Giggles, soft and bubbly, flutter in the dark. Well now, that is a very fine compliment. Which hero was I like? Not All Might. No, not All Might, he agrees. You didn't smile enough. But maybe. Night Song. She doesn't smile a lot, but she's very regal and doesn't get flustered by anything. More giggles. I'm probably as red as a tomato right now, you shameless flatterer. How did you know what to say? Oh, well, that's just a simple management technique. Sometimes you run into people who just want to fight. So the trick is not to engage in the fight. Don't raise your voice and don't point out the other's mistakes or poor behavior, or they'll just turn it around on you and drag you all over the place. If you engage in irrational fight, you've pretty much already lost. An irrational fight, he murmurs. An irrational fight. I'm sure you've been in a few already. I remember plenty during my school days. He recalls his argument with Kaken last week. It hadn't seemed irrational at the time. They'd each presented rational viewpoints, but then it had ended with Kaken acting like a total jerk. Maybe that wasn't the same sort of fight his mom was talking about though. He hadn't been the one to raise his voice and insult his opponent, after all. He decides to keep her words in mind just in case he runs into one later. A yawn catches him by surprise. Ready to sleep now? She whispers. I think so. Then good night, Izuku. I love you. Good night, I love you too. Izuku never has to be alone in the apartment with Hisashi after that. His mom buys him a bus pass the next morning so he can ride to the library after school or to the beachfront if the weather is nice. He honestly prefers the library, where he can not only finish his homework, but they also have a computer lab where he can watch hero videos, and there's even back issues of Hero Weekly and Quirk. He can check out. He's not the only kid who hangs out there after school, but he might be the most frequent. Typically, he rides to the train station to meet up with his mom, and they walk back to the apartment or visit a store on the way together to talk about their day. Some weekends he'll spend the night at the Bakugos and Kaken, and he spend all Sunday running around the neighborhood or watching hero movies. It's tolerable. There's nothing particularly bad about any of it. Some of it is even pleasant. It feels like it could be someone's normal, just not Izuku's. Kaken doesn't talk about Izuku's new situation. Not to their classmates, his cronies, or even Izuku himself. Izuku knows he hasn't forgotten because every once in a while he'll just look at him as if he's trying to decide something. But whatever it is, it remains a secret and he's glad. School and Kaken are the only things that haven't changed, and he doesn't think he could stand it if he lost those last pieces of familiarity. So, he smiles even when he doesn't feel like it and cries when he's teased and goes through the motions so no one will suspect. The apartment is intolerable and getting worse with every rejection Hisashi receives. Izuku's back to being ignored, but Inko is now a daily target to vent his spleen. He calls her fat and stupid and pathetic and uglier things a child shouldn't have to hear, especially directed at his mother. She answers back, "If you have laundry, leave it outside your door and I'll handle it tomorrow, and I hear Vroga's Vast Pharmaceuticals is hiring and good night." It should make her seem meek, but instead it makes her sound like an adult talking to a toddler who doesn't know how to behave. It infuriates Hisashi, but even he knows how petty and childish he looks hurling insults at a woman who ignores them. He's always the first to skulk away, and she's left the prize-less victor. If sometimes her eyes look puffy and red after she steps out of the bathroom, Izuku never mentions it. They go to bed early every night, genuinely exhausted, each looking forward to the morning's escape. His mother whispers to him every task she's completed that gets them closer to the end of this nightmare. "I've submitted my resume for a promotion. Tomitaka-san is very optimistic. Subium-san from the Housing Commission thinks she can find a place for us by June, September at the absolute latest. A lot of families move during summer break apparently. I opened a new bank account. The papers are in my briefcase." Izuku nods and smiles and tells her she's wonderful. But no matter how much progress she seems to make, they are still hiding from his father in their little bedroom every night with no end in sight. 2 months creep by, summer break around the corner. Hisashi is still unemployed. Inko still hasn't gotten word back on the promotion or the new apartment. Izuku finds it harder to smile, harder to cry. Has he gotten tougher or just number? Everything's just harder. Despite having plenty of time to complete his homework at the library, he's distracted in class and his grades are starting to slip. His teacher asks him more than once if everything is all right at home. His classmates take to smacking him in the head with the kickball at recess as a recurring joke as he fails to notice it coming no matter how often they do it. One day, when he doesn't immediately start crying, they hit him again and again, jeering the usual taunts. "Quirkless nerd. Crybaby. Useless fanboy." Maybe this is an irrational fight, he thinks. He doesn't think telling them about the weather tomorrow or offering to do their laundry is the right response in this situation, so he just curls into a ball and waits. It stops quicker than he thought it would, but he remains curled in case it's a trick. "They're gone, Deku." He peeks cautiously between his arms at Kaken. He's played this trick on him before too. But there's no ball in his hand, and his arms are crossed and not cackling with his quirk. Everyone else has already run off. Izuku stands and offers him a grin. "I didn't cry that time," he boasts. Kaken rolls his eyes. "Good for you, nerd. Maybe you'll actually stand up for yourself before you're 90? Mean Kaken. The fucking meanest." He grins and Izuku can feel his smile turn into something real. "So what's happening with your dad? Your mom kick him out yet?" "What?" His smile freezes. "I don't." He doesn't know what to say. Why is Kaken even asking? Yes or no? "No," Izuku says uncertainly. "She's working on it. It's been 2 months. 2 months, 1 week, and a day." He's perfectly aware of how long it's been and doesn't need anyone else telling him. His mom is working as hard and as fast as she can, and who is Kaken to imply otherwise? Did he think his mom had forgotten or something? Rearranging an entire life isn't some chore one can push through in a weekend. Is this an irrational argument? Is Kakin just looking to start a fight with him? When he doesn't reply, the other boy gives him the look. The one that he's been giving him off and on for weeks, working through some internal debate. Only today, it seems he's come to a decision. He hurt you? What? No. The shout catches them both off guard and sends every head in the schoolyard turning in their direction. Izuku flushes. How can Kakin just ask him that? Ask him here of all places? And he doesn't look the least bothered by it either, arms crossed and staring at him as if expecting something owed to him. Yeah, that was not convincing, he says bluntly. He's never laid a hand on me, Izuku insists and then regrets. It's none of his business. He doesn't have to explain himself. That's not the only way he can hurt you. He says it as if though he knows what he's talking about. As if he's already got Izuku and his mom and his dad figured. Like his family must be some movie cliché, the drunk, deadbeat dad who sits in front of TV all day drinking and slaps around his family at night, the cowering wife too afraid to do anything but cry and try to placate him. And what role did Izuku play in his head? The starving waif sobbing in the corner? Spending his nights sifting through garbage cans for his next meal? I suppose you'd know, Izuku snaps. That isn't the same and you know it. I know you don't know what you're talking about. Because how could Kakin possibly understand? He's got two parents who love each other, who are proud of him, a house, a quirk, a future all laid out. When has anything ever not gone his way? He spends all his time looking for a challenge, when for Izuku that's all life had been since he was 4. And now he wants to come up to him and tell Izuku he's a victim on top of being a quirkless, crybaby weakling? Does he think he's going to rescue him? That he's going to be the youngest hero ever? Are you calling me stupid? Kakin demands, his arms uncrossing, a sure sign he's getting ready to activate his quirk. It's a warning, an intimidation technique. Izuku's seen it 1,000 times. Normally, he takes the hint and backs off, concedes, surrenders. Normally, Izuku's isn't this blindly furious. You are stupid. He screams it for Kakin and everyone else on the schoolyard to hear, maybe even inside the school itself. Kakin takes it with his usual grace and punches him. There's a deafening crack, a wave of heat and pain against his cheek, followed by a second wave of pain as he hits the ground. This time he does cry, though he grits his teeth to bite back sobs. Somehow, he's still more angry than hurt. He opens teary eyes to glare at his assailant, who is looking back at him in disbelief. Still stupid. Later, after the school nurse had cleaned and bandaged the burn on his cheek and he and Kakin were forced to wait in angry silence outside the principal's office while their parents were called, Izuku realizes he's just had an irrational fight. Only he hadn't been on Inko's pacifistic side, but rather on the angry Hisashi side of things. Not exactly a shining moment for any would-be hero. It's an argument that most would consider lost with that wicked punch to the face, but Izuku isn't so sure. The punch had ended the fight, but Izuku had had the last word and they both knew it. It's the first time he's ever won a real argument against Kakin, but he's not sure how he's supposed to feel about it. On the one hand, he's still angry and thinks the other boy should have minded his own business. On the other hand, he doesn't know if his anger is justified or not. His mom had said Hisashi started irrational fights because he is trying to hide from his own shame. Was this the same thing? Had he started that fight himself because he was ashamed? Thinking back on it, it's a clear and resounding yes. Kakin hadn't started the fight, had probably thought he was doing the right thing. That he came off as smug and pretentious didn't change the fact that Izuku's the one who had flown off the handle and insulted him intentionally. Still, the exploding punch had been a bit much. I'm here for the little terror. They look over to the secretary's desk where Auntie Mitsuki has just strode in looking ready for a corporate takeover. Her job has something to do with the fashion industry, and she always wears nice clothes, but Izuku thinks lawyer whenever he sees her dressed for work. Dove gray pinstripe suits and red lipsticks that bring out the crimson of her eyes and heels you needed a weapons license to wear. It's easy to see where Kakin gets his confidence and flair. She ruffles Izuku's hair and coos over the bandage on his face before turning to her kid and ripping into him. Kaken snarls back at her with equal fervor until Brat and Old Hag are being lobbed back and forth. The principal opens his office door and regards them with a put-upon expression. It's not the first time the Bakugos have been to her office. We're just waiting for Midoriya-san and we can get started, she says. I don't see why we need to involve Inko in this, Mitsuki protests. It was probably Katsuki's fault. Fuck you, Old Hag. Izuku almost feels bad for him. Almost. Not really. No, we couldn't get through to his mother, the principal says. But his father His father is here, Hisashi states coldly. Dread pools in Izuku's gut as they all turn to see his father standing there. He is wearing a business suit, hair slicked back, and clean-shaven. Did he have another interview today or had he dressed up just for this? He isn't quite Mitsuki-level corporate hellion, but he did hold his own tangible presence. What the fuck are you doing here? Mitsuki snarls. I was summoned. Funny, I don't see a Uji board anywhere. Dear Mitsuki, charming as I remember, he sneers back at her. They squeeze into the principal's office and take their seats in uncomfortable chairs, his father and Katsuki's mom farthest from each other with their respective children between them. Hisashi, Auntie Mitsuki, and Kaken glare at one another, while Izuku tries and fails to find somewhere safe to look. Let's get to it then, the principal says. Katsuki and Izuku had an altercation at recess. No one knows what it was about and neither has offered an explanation, but it ended with shouting and then Katsuki hitting Izuku with his quirk activated. Izuku suffered a minor burn to the face, but I shouldn't have to tell you how much worse it could have been if he'd been struck directly in the eye or the ear with even the smallest explosion. I ain't that fucking careless. Kaken barks furiously. Mitsuki slaps him upside the head. It's not a gentle slap. Watch your language. Then you admit to hitting Izuku with your quirk intentionally? The principal asks pointedly. That silences him quick, and he crosses his arms and looks away without answering. She turns her attention to Izuku. And do you have anything to say, Izuku? Do you think Katsuki hit you with his quirk intentionally? He squirms in his chair. Why did she have to ask him that? Doesn't she realize how unfair that is? Of course, Kaken had hit him with his quirk intentionally. Likewise, he'd intentionally avoided hitting his eye or ear. More importantly, however, is that he couldn't say either of those things. He might get Katsuki in trouble today, but Izuku is the one who has to deal with the consequences of being a snitch every day afterwards. Besides, Kaken is still his friend and Izuku is technically the one who started the fight in the first place. As far as he is concerned, this should remain between them. No, he says. We were just horsing around, and his hands were already sweaty from playing. It was an accident? Is that so? The principal asks with obvious skepticism. Izuku just nods. Kaken scowls and says nothing. And what were you arguing about? She asks. I don't remember. Who was a better hero or some SH thing, Kaken says. Something stupid. I see. She looks speculatively at the two boys, then at their parents. Bakugo-san, since Katsuki is the one who made the fight physical, I am suspending him for the rest of the week. When he gets back Monday, I want him to retake the quirk safety lecture during recess. Hopefully, this time around it will stick. Kaken glowers but doesn't say anything. Probably because Mitsuki is glaring murder at him. Izuku knows he's in bigger trouble with his mom than he is with the principal, and his suspension isn't going to be any sort of vacation. The principal turns to Hisashi. Izuku can return to class as usual but will sit out recess for the rest of the week. There's a beat of silence. That's it? Hisashi asks. Another beat. Mitsuki snorts. What were you expecting? Caning with a bamboo rod? Excuse me for not being as familiar as you with the school disciplinary system. Not all of us have the privilege of raising a future villain. Kaken jumps to his feet and thrusts his fingers so close to Hisashi's face the man flinches back. How the fuck would you know, deadbeat? I don't remember ever seeing your sorry ass around before today. What kid have you been raising, because it sure as hell isn't this one. Kaken. Izuku protests. You idiot. You selfish moron. Katsuki, the principal admonishes but nothing else. Auntie Mitsuki doesn't help matters by just turning away to hide her smirk. Izuku feels utterly betrayed. Why can't they understand? Why can't anyone understand that this isn't going to end here? That he has to go home with Hisashi after this? His father flushes, burning with embarrassment or anger or both at a child's all too accurate truth. There's a faint plume of smoke wafting from his nostrils. He stands and pulls Izuku up with him. This was a waste of time. We're done here, he says and storms out of the office, dragging Izuku behind him. Midori-san, the principal calls after him, but he ignores her. It's hard to keep up with his father's long, quick strides, but no matter how often he trips and stumbles, the hard grip on his upper arm just keeps pulling him up and forward. Hisashi doesn't look back, gaze trained forward as he escapes the office, the school, the grounds. On the street, people stare at them. Izuku is shaking. His eyes become watery with fear and humiliation. Hope and dread war inside him. Surely someone will stop them, demand to know what Hisashi is doing with a terrified child. But no one does anything. No one confronts them. No one calls the police. No hero appears. It wouldn't have made a difference anyway. This is my son. I've just picked him up from the principal's office for fighting. Of course, he's in trouble, his father would say. Something like that. The pace doesn't let up until they reach the apartment. Izuku panics and drags his feet, terrified what will happen once they're behind closed doors, but his small body proves a poor anchor as he's all but carried inside. Hisashi doesn't stop in the entryway, doesn't even stop to remove his shoes, but hauls him to his room before throwing him to the floor. Izuku curls into a ball expecting to be kicked. Get up, his father demands impatiently. I'm not going to hit you. Get up. Cautiously, Izuku does so, inching as far away from him as possible. There's no telling what is going to happen now that this stranger has finally been forced to acknowledge his existence, but he knows it's nothing good. The room is too small to properly pace for a man of his father's size, but he makes a show of traveling an abbreviated circuit, his cold eyes flickering from his posters to his all-might figurines to the bed his mom uses now. He pauses at the desk, reaches out to pull off one of his hero analysis notebooks. He flips through it, his expression growing more contemptuous with every page. Izuku flinches as it's tossed carelessly at his feet. So, you fancy yourself some sort of future hero? You? Izuku says nothing. Irrational fight, he tells himself. Don't engage in irrational fight. He needs to be calm and reasonable like his mom, but he can't stop his hands from shaking. Can't think of anything reasonable to say. Even if you had inherited a quirk, it would be useless. The most amazing quirk in the world wouldn't change the fact that you're a complete doormat. The words gut him. Even Kaken blames his quirklessness for him being a helpless crybaby. No one has ever said he'd be pathetic even with a quirk before. Tears burn his eyes at the worst possible moment. He fights them back, but it's useless, and he's soon sniffling and sobbing uncontrollably. Stop it. It's not true. It's not true. Stop making it true. Then Hisashi reaches for the nearest poster, a limited edition All Might with holographic display, and tears it from the wall. Izuku gasps. He remembers winning that poster. It had been during a present mic radio contest that had been airing all week. His mom had let him play the radio while they did the dishes, and after 4 days of telling his mom the answers one after another, she had stopped in the middle of their chore to grin at him and pick up her phone. He could barely believe it when she had gotten through, her voice echoing from the radio as she repeated the answers he'd given her. He remembers the pride and joy when Present Mike had shouted her the winner over the air, and she'd laughed and said, "Good thing I live with the youngest hero expert in Nuzurifu." Disbelief battles with pain at the casual destruction of the poster, as if even that wonderful memory is somehow being ripped apart. You don't deserve this. You don't deserve any of this. Your heroes would be disgusted to have you for a fan. Hisashi sneers at him. Get rid of it? It. Pack up all this hero junk and get rid of it. I want all of it gone by tomorrow morning, or I'll burn whatever I find left. Izuku's heart drops into his stomach. Please no. He'd rather be kicked, hit, belted. Bruises and cuts healed, but his collection couldn't be replaced. Even the most common items are attached to a memory, a feeling, a discovery. Izuku didn't mark the passing of his childhood in birthdays or inches on a growth chart. He marked them off in hero notebooks, UA sports festivals, and Happy Meal prizes. His posters meant more than yearbook photos, his figurines more than the allowance he spent on them. And now he's being told to throw it out? It would be like throwing out a part of his soul. And staring up into Hisashi's eyes, gleaming with a cruel satisfaction, he thinks his father must know it too. His mom comes home early. Too late to have averted catastrophe, but well before Izuku is finished untacking his posters and gathering up his memorabilia. There's a lot to go through. His room is one giant shrine to All Might, and plenty of other hero merch has found its way into his closet and on his shelves. Piece by piece, the room becomes emptier and emptier, and he feels himself emptying with it. Hisashi had tossed a trash bag at him some point, but it isn't nearly enough and Izuku refuses to touch it anyway. Hisashi might think it is all garbage, but he refuses to treat it as such. He carefully binds together his magazines and books with rubber bands, puts figurines back in their original boxes, and folds the clothes neatly. He'll pack them up and leave them in boxes at the apartment playground with a note for kids to take what they like. Maybe some of them will get the same joy out of them as he'd had. Maybe he'd get to see little boys and girls playing with the figurines or wearing the clothes from time to time. If he had friends, he would ask them to hold on to it all for him, but all he has is Kaken, and right now friend isn't the word that comes to mind when he thinks of him. This is Kaken's fault. If he hadn't insulted Hisashi, if he hadn't hit Izuku in the first place, or even just kept his stupid question to himself. Izuku? Honey, he hears but he doesn't have the energy to call back. He's so tired. His eyes are swollen and heavy from crying, and everything from his head down to the base of his spine ache as if under pressure. Sleep sounds wonderful, but he doesn't know how he'll be able to without his all-might comforter or pajamas. She all but runs into his room, frantic and fearing the worst. Her look of utter relief at seeing him sitting unmarked on his bedroom floor is soon replaced with pain as she takes in the bareness of the room and the blankness in her son's eyes. Dropping to her knees, she pulls him into a hug. Mitsuki called and told me what happened. I came as quickly as I could. What did he do, baby? Please tell me what he did. He tells her. It feels stupid saying it aloud. All this fuss over piggy banks and pencils and baseball caps. He thinks his mom will say, "It's all right, baby, we'll get you new things." She doesn't. She's his mom. She misunderstands him from time to time, but something this fundamental is impossible for her to miss. We're leaving tonight, she tells him. He doesn't understand at first. We'll pack up as much as we can, and I'll call a taxi to take us to a hotel. Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. We should have left weeks ago. But we can't afford. It'll be tight, but we can do it. We are doing it. You don't ever have to see him again. He doesn't think he can cry anymore, hates himself for managing it somehow. It's relief and it's shame. It's over. It's finally over. Why is he so weak? His mom, who is terrified of spiders and scary movies, is strong enough to face Hisashi, brave enough to leave him. Those tears in her eyes aren't for herself, but because he's so pitiful it makes her cry. Why couldn't he stand up to him? Why couldn't he look him straight in the eye without flinching? Why couldn't he be like Kaken and shout in his face, "So now you can see me, deadbeat? Fine, now I can pretend you don't exist." His mom calls the taxi from his room and helps him repack the boxes, his book bag, his little suitcase before going to pack for herself. Hisashi confronts her in the hall. "What are you doing?" "I'm packing." "And where do you think you're going?" "It doesn't matter. You're not invited. You bitch dash." She cuts him off, not shouting but with a cold edge to her voice Izuku's never heard before. This bitch has already called a taxi but can just as quickly call the police and have you charged with domestic abuse. Can have it corroborated by the neighbors who've had to listen to you screaming at this bitch through the walls for the last 2 months and by the bruise on my son's arm and the burn on his cheek. And if you think getting a job in this economy is difficult, wait until you see how hard it is with a criminal record. Izuku doesn't hear anything after that except his mom moving around the apartment, and finally the doorbell. His mom guides him from his room to the door, keeping herself physically between him and the man glaring at them from the dining room table. The driver takes one look at them both and helps gather up their mishmash of bags and boxes without comment. Mothers, still watching their children at the playground, stare at them with wide eyes, hands over their mouths as if seeing something scandalous. His mom leaves Izuku in the car as they finish loading, and he crouches down in his seat to avoid their gawking. 15 minutes later, they're pulling away onto the street and heading east. There's a hotel a few blocks from here. The Tantive Dash. I know it, the driver says. It's no good. Not for a woman and child on their own. Bad business goes down over there. If you're looking for cheap and long-term, I'll take you to the Falcon a few blocks over. The manager is a harridan, but she keeps the lowlifes out and the place clean. Your husband comes looking for you there, and she'll kick his ass. She's got a gravity quirk anyone would think twice about messing with. She thanks him and takes his offer. The Falcon is just how he described. It's cheap, clean, and the manager barks out her rates before even asking their names. She grumbles out the rules and restrictions as she shows them to their room. It was probably blue once but has faded to dull gray walls and a carpet so thin and mottled it couldn't be described as any sort of color at all. There's an old TV that only gets local stations, no internet, and a tiny kitchenette with a hot plate. The driver helps them unload their boxes from the car, and when Inko tries to pay him he shakes his head. I've got a nephew your son's age, he says as if that explains anything. Maybe it does because his mom starts crying. Things are better after that, but Izuku isn't yet prepared to call it good. His mom helps him unpack some of his things to decorate their drab little room, and All Might's smiling face does a lot to cheer the place up, but there's nothing to be done about the kitchen. There is neither the room nor the equipment to make things up to Inko's usual standards, so they settle for making a lot of noodles and rice. Izuku's quite proud of himself for learning to make those himself using the hot plate, though his mom warns him not to touch it when she's not there. His mom continues to work long hours, but Izuku no longer dreads her absence. Sometimes he still goes to the library after school. Sometimes he comes straight back to the apartment. Sometimes he just wanders around his new neighborhood, looking for hero activity or convenience stores that sell his favorite magazines. It's not as nice as the neighborhood around his apartment, with hardly any parks or playgrounds, but there's a canal with a walking path he likes to explore and a pet store that always has something cute playing in the front window. His concentration in school improves and so too do his grades, but that's about the only improvement. Kaken returns to class but refuses to talk to him. Izuku doesn't try. He still blames the other boy for what happened with Hisashi, and even though he's glad to be away from the man once and for all, he's still not happy with being put in that position in the first place. It's not their first fight, but it's the first time Izuku questions whether their friendship will survive it. When they're apart, particularly on weekends, Izuku misses him terribly and wants nothing more than to make up. But when he sees him at school, he finds himself getting angry all over again and ends up avoiding him. Some of their classmates notice their distance and start calling him friendless as well as quirkless during their teasing, which is even more persistent without Kaken there to tell them to fuck off when they start getting on his nerves. So far, he's managed not to break down completely into sobs but hasn't succeeded in stopping his eyes from tearing up altogether. He wants to be tougher, but even pro-heroes don't seem to have much in the way of advice like he'd assumed. All he can do is wait out the days, smiling for his mom and doing nothing to make her worry. He just wishes he knew what it is he is waiting for. The divorce? The new apartment? To forget this constant feeling of helpless frustration with himself? Summer vacation is coming up, his mom says over diner one night. The days have already turned sweltering, and they've foregone using the hot plate in favor of making sandwiches. Something else Izuku is becoming proficient at making. He's starting to think this cooking thing isn't as hard as he thought. You should try making up with Katsuki before then. I don't want you to have to spend the next 6 weeks alone. He nearly chokes. How did his mom know he and Kaken weren't talking? Yes, they had had that fight at school, but that was hardly new. His mom is so busy lately, he didn't think she had noticed. Just because you boys aren't talking doesn't mean Mitsuki and I don't, she offers when she sees his confusion. He takes a drink of his iced tea and tries to think of a response. It isn't as if he hasn't thought of this before, but he's reached no satisfactory conclusion. He hasn't apologized yet, Izuku says finally. Apologized? Yeah. For hitting me and getting me in trouble? She's silent for a long moment. Are you sure he knows you're mad about that? I'm sure he doesn't care why I'm mad, he says resentfully and takes another bite out of his sandwich. He doesn't want to talk to me because I called him stupid, even though he says that to me all the time. I don't see why I should have to apologize to him, but he never has to apologize to me. If he wants to be that big of a jerk, I don't want to be friends with him anymore. But even as he says it, even though he means it, he can feel his eyes getting watery. His throat feels tight, and he can barely swallow his food. His mom looks at him with such sympathy. He can't cry. If he does, then his mom will feel bad and start crying too. Oh, baby, you don't mean that. Yes, I do. And he does. He wants to be tougher. He wants to stand up for himself, even if that just means refusing to be the first to apologize. If he does, Kaken might take it, but he won't give one back, and Izuku will be exactly what Hisashi called him. A doormat. They finish the rest of their dinner in silence. No one cries, but Izuku can't quite bring himself to smile either. The day before summer vacation starts, Kaken stops avoiding him. He sits next to him at lunch, asks for a pencil during class, and stands beside him during the final assembly of the semester. He doesn't talk to Izuku, but he hovers as if waiting for him to do something. Izuku knows what this is. They've done this song and dance before. Kaken does something wrong, takes his rough housing too far or says something he doesn't mean, and rather than apologize he just waits to be forgiven. Izuku's usually eager to do so. It's tempting. It's so tempting to just turn to him, smile, and ask if he read the latest issue of Hero Weekly or if he wants to go to the beach together that weekend. Everything forgotten, apology not required. As the school day ends and they gather up their things, Izuku finally turns to him. Kaken smiles. Izuku smiles back. Have a good summer vacation, Katsuki, he says, turns, and leaves. He leaves quickly but with his head held high. He should feel proud of himself. He isn't a doormat. Not anymore. He is standing up for himself, and it hadn't taken until he was 90 to do it. It's a step in the right direction. So why did this feel like that last day at the apartment? As if some essential part of him had just been thrown away. It's a miserable summer vacation. It's sweltering during the day and the hotel air conditioner is a joke. He spends his time split between the library, the beach, and the convenience store. Everywhere else is too hot. Loneliness and boredom are his only companions as he tries to find something that makes him happy. Ice cream bars, swimming, adventure novels. All it does is make him wish Kaken were there to share it with. He finds himself wondering what the other boy is doing and whether he might miss his Deku. Probably not. He had his cronies after all. What did he need Izuku for? Every day is a failed distraction, but he goes through the motions anyway, if only so he can smile at dinner and tell his mom something nice about his day. 4 weeks into vacation the routine breaks. And there was a wedding going on further down the beach, but I don't think they thought that through because there were seagulls everywhere. I doubt they could hear each other's vows over all that squalling, not to mention the mess. At least the bride was safe under the gazebo. He rambles as he helps her fold laundry on the bed that night. She smiles, but he can tell she's only half listening. I have some good news, she tells him after his story winds down. I got a promotion. Congratulations. You did it, Mom. That's wonderful. Thank you, honey, she says, but her smile turns strained. What's wrong? Isn't this good? It is good, but there is a catch. What do you mean? Well, I didn't want to say anything before, but I didn't get the original promotion I applied for. I didn't want to worry you, but it's the real reason I hadn't settled on an apartment yet. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because, well, we're going to have to move away from Yuzudafu. He blinks. He opens his mouth to protest. Closes it. Tries again. Oh, I understand. Izuku. It's fine, Mom. Because of course it's fine. Why should it matter to him if they moved? It isn't like there's anything here for him. His home is gone, his classmates bully him, and he's already ended his only friendship. The only person who really matters to him now is his mom, and she is coming with him. So who cares? His mom doesn't look convinced, so he gives her his all-might grin. It'll be fun. Maybe I can make some friends at my new school and check out some of the local heroes. Is it bigger than Yuzudafu? Is it close to the ocean? The mountains? She hugs him. I'm not sad, Mom, he insists. I'm not crying. Her arms only tighten around him. I know, baby. You're such a good boy, but your mother needs to cry a little, okay? I'm going to be a little sad for the both of us. Love wells up in his chest, heavy but warm, and radiates outwards into the arms he throws around her. She's soft. Everything about her is soft, from the plumpness of her body to the smoothness of her cheek against his and the color of her blouse. She's so soft but so strong, and he loves her so much right now he can barely stand it. Inko's new job, their new life, is in Hosu. Now that the promotion has gone through, his mom is around a lot more than before, preparing for the move. She's always on her phone talking to her boss, the Hosa Housing Commission, the moving company, her divorce lawyer, or some person he has no clue about. He likes to listen to her, likes the assured and competent tone of her voice, the legal jargon she makes sound like beautiful foreign words. He still feels slightly ill when he thinks about leaving Mizutafu, but listening to her gives those feelings an edge of anticipation as well. It's a new world out there, but Captain Inko is standing diligently at the helm. Sometimes, when the hotel room gets too unbearably hot or the phone calls insufferably bureaucratic, she'll take him to the ice cream parlor and leave her phone behind to recharge. They'll eat their sundaes and look out the window at their small, bright city, thinks this is ending, and sink into a gentle melancholy. Sometimes his mom will send him on an errand, and when he comes back, he'll hear her through the door, yelling or pleading, and he'll walk extra laps around the building until it stops. Sometimes she has the day off from work but still goes out for the day looking as if she's attending a funeral. They go to bed early on those nights, Inko inexplicably exhausted. "Your father's behaving like a stroppy teenager again," she says when he asks. "I suppose he doesn't have anything better to do than kick up a fuss?" He doesn't ask what she means. He doesn't want to know anything about Hisashi or what he's doing now. As far as Izuku is concerned, he's back to being the non-entity of before. Best forgotten as soon as possible. Summer vacation ends before the move. Izuku doesn't want to go back to school. It feels strange when he'll just be leaving in a few weeks, but his mom thinks he's already had too much free time on his hands already. Everything is exactly the same when he returns. His classmates are a little tanner, a little livelier, but generally just as unpleasant as he remembers, and the school routine just as predictable. When he enters the classroom, he finds Kaken at his desk, staring out the window. He refuses to look at Izuku for the entire day. All his pride and anger desert him. All that time he had spent alone seems so pointless. Why hadn't he just forgiven Kaken? They'd been together forever. There had been fights. 1,000 fights, insults, misunderstandings. But there had been a million smiles, laughs, games, secrets, entire conversations held without words. And this is how it ends? In silence? Kaken dash, he tries the next day, before class starts. "Shut up, Deku," the other snaps without looking at him. "I'm dash. I don't give a fuck, Deku. Get away from me. Your nerd vibes are giving me a headache." "You heard the guy," one of his cronies mocks. "You ain't welcome over here. Go back to Loserville on the other side of the room." Izuku goes, but only because he's already decided to try and get Kaken alone later. Except there is no getting Kaken alone. His cronies stick close all day, and when they're not there, Kaken makes himself the center of attention with someone else. It happens the next day and the day after. It doesn't take long to figure out he's being purposefully avoided. He's hurt, but he gets it. It must have hurt him when Izuku had left for 6 weeks with a "have a nice summer" Katsuki, where "let's have fun this summer" Kaken should have been. Izuku had rejected Kaken first, and now it's his turn. But they don't have time. Next week, Izuku will be gone and may never come back. They need to make things right between them, to cement the friendship he knows is still there under the hurt feelings and resentment, before distance and time destroy it completely. His mom and Inko's middle school friendship had survived a 7-year separation until Mitsuki had moved back to Mizutafu after college. Surely Kaken and Izuku's could survive until they met again at UA? Only if he could somehow get Kaken to forgive him first. This called for desperate measures. That night, he spends nearly an hour sorting through his box of All Might figurines, trying to decide which would work best. The blue Premier All Might with the light-up fists? No, too big. The Grand Design limited edition with talking catchphrase? No, it could go off in the middle of class. Then he finds it. The All-American All Might action figure, from back when the hero was still working Los Angeles, with no less than 12 movable joints for ultimate maneuverability. It's the one Kaken had always played with when he visited Izuku's apartment, the one he'd borrowed more than once until Auntie Mitsuki had made him give it back. It's perfect. What on earth are you up to over there? His mom asks from where she's watching TV on the bed. I've decided to make up with Kaken, he says with his best all-might smile. The smile she gives him back is almost as big. I'm so glad to hear that. But what does that have to do with all of this? It's a goodbye present. So, he doesn't forget me. He writes a note to go with it. Actually, he writes 2 notes. The first one takes up both the front and back of a full sheet of notebook paper. Then he realizes there is no way Kaken will have the patience to read it, and he writes a second, much shorter one. He hopes this will work. Inko loves her son. More than that, she adores him. It's a mother's prerogative to think their child is wonderful and special, but Inko genuinely believes her Izuku has a little something extra about him. Who else had a child so young and yet so selfless? So antagonized and yet still so forgiving? With everything that has happened, he has every right to be resentful, depressed, and scared. And sometimes he is those things, but it never seems to come natural to him and never lasts long. He's hardworking, intelligent, kind, and well-mannered. She's very lucky to be able to call him hers. But right now, she's highly tempted to smother him with her pillow. He's been tossing and turning, unable to settle, and keeping them both awake. Tomorrow she would be facing Hisashi, hopefully for the last time, and she already felt exhausted at the thought. Honey, she pleads tiredly. I really need to get some sleep for tomorrow. I have to get some papers signed and I don't think I can handle the confrontation without at least 8 hours. The divorce papers? He asks softly. And the custody papers? This is the last chance to settle things before we leave. I want us both to have a clean start. They both deserve that. Izuku is silent for a beat. What if we miss Mizudafu? She lets out a tired sigh, counts to 10, and reminds herself he's been very patient with her and deserves the same consideration. Of course, we'll miss Mizudafu. Our best friends are here. Our memories are all here. We have to give the new place time. Collect new memories, make some new friends. If we give it a chance, I'm sure we'll have wonderful experiences we would have missed if we had stayed here. Just give it a chance. Will, he says. That's my good boy. Now let your poor mother get some sleep, okay? Sorry. Good night. I love you. Good night, Izuku. I love you too. He stops moving around mostly, but she can tell he's now any nearer to sleep. She's more than a little exasperated with herself to find she isn't either. The confrontation looms ahead of her. Hisashi looms over her. The final hurdle, and one that's spiteful enough to try and kick her feet out from under her as she tries to leap over it. Spiteful enough to she's not sure of his limit. If someone had told her on her wedding day all the injustices her husband would perpetrate against her and her child, she would have slapped them and accused them of being her mother's minion. Her mother had seen Hisashi for what he was, or perhaps what he would become, but Inko hadn't believed her. Couldn't believe a woman who had married poorly twice was any judge of character. Now her mother is dead and gone, and Inko wishes she could ask her if she thinks Hisashi would ever become violent. She wants to say no. That if he were to become violent, then he would have become so before now. But she can't claim to understand him. Not anymore. Maybe she never did. The unassuming, hopeful man who'd courted her had transformed before her eyes by some spiritual alchemy she still couldn't fathom into the selfish and hateful man he is today. He scares her now. But this needs to happen. The final obstacle to cut the legal strings and be free of each other. For her sake. For Izuku's sake. Perhaps even for Hisashi's sake. She needs to be brave. But more urgently, she needs to sleep. His mom hugs him before he leaves for school. Not uncommon for her, but it's longer and stronger than usual. Have a good day, Izuku. Good luck with Katsuki. Thanks, Mo. Good luck with the papers. School is school, and Kaken is still ignoring him. Izuku goes through the motions of the day and waits for an opportunity. He only really has 4. The first he misses when he arrives in the class and can't get alone long to slip the apology into Kaken's jacket. The second is at lunch when he goes to grab his bento but sensei stops him to discuss news of his transfer. That is particularly nerve-wracking. He honestly doesn't want anyone to know he's leaving except Kaken, whose mom probably already told him. Nothing comes of it. No one is paying them any attention, but he misses his second chance. That leaves only recess, and as they're leaving for the day, and only recess could he reasonably be alone long enough. While everyone is playing, he asks the teacher to let him go inside to use the bathroom. He goes directly to the classroom instead and quickly transfers the All Might and note into Katsuki's bag. His hands shake. He unreasonably expects one of his classmates to appear in the doorway and accuse him of taking something out of Kaken's bag or demanding to know what sort of prank he is pulling. But aside from someone throwing a kickball at his head again, he dodges it this time, much to their disappointment. When he returns outside, nothing happens. Mission complete. Now all that's left to do is wait. He's able to relax enough after that to smile, even if only to himself. Everything would be okay. He knows it. The fire trucks racing by that afternoon barely draw his or anyone else's attention, nor the police cars and ambulances that follow. Even a city as modestly sized as Mizudafu still has its fair share of fires and accidents. There is no sense of foreboding, no omen of misfortune. Everything is as it should be during a hot August school day, lethargic and almost unnaturally bright. He's concentrating on a spelling test, writing down the kanji for it obstruct, when there's a knock on the classroom door. A policeman steps inside, and the illusion of normalcy shatters. "I'm looking for Midoriya Izuku." The moment the bell rings, Katsuki is out the classroom and hurtling from the building. Teachers and students alike leap out of his way, shouting outrage at his back, but he doesn't care. He needs out of here. He needs to know if his dreadful premonition is right. Izuku's apartment isn't far. He knows the way by heart. Even if he didn't, he would have found it. All he had to do was follow the smoke. Half the apartment complex is burning and still spreading when he runs up. Firefighters and a slew of no-name heroes are dousing the flames through shattered windows while homeless residents and gawkers stare on in fascinated horror. Several of them are crying or being tended to by EMTs. Katsuki searches the crowd for Inko's trademark green hair, but it's useless. She would be at work, he tells himself. She wouldn't have been here. Except she could have been. She is always home before Izuku. At least she used to be. Izuku had said she was working more hours, back when they were still talking. But Katsuki had no idea what those hours were, hadn't asked while they were friends, and sure as hell hadn't asked after Izuku had blown him off for the summer. "Hey," he asks the nearest gawker, a middle-aged man holding a shopping bag. "What happened?" "Some sort of villain attack," he said idly, as if it is all an especially boring TV show. "A man killed his wife, and when the cops came, he set fire to the building to escape." He knows. It doesn't take a genius. A villain who has a fire quirk. The police who came for Deku. Izuku. Oh God, Izuku. Tears are starting to pool in his eyes, but no way is he going to start bawling here. He runs. Back towards the school and then past it towards his own house. It's hot, he's sweating through his clothes, the sickly sweet smell of nitroglycerin in his nostrils. If he accidentally bumps anyone now, he'll blow them all the way to Fiji. He doesn't quite make it home before the tears finally begin to fall, but there's no one to see. It takes 2 tries to unlock the door, his hands shaking and his vision blurry, and once inside he rushes to the bathroom to wash his sweaty hands and teary face. He calls his mom first. "Bakugo Mitsuki," his mom answers impatiently. "What do you want?" "Mom," he says, and then his throat closes up. "Katsuki? What's wrong?" she asks, her impatience softening into worry. Of course, he never calls her mom unless he's upset. He tries to speak, but all that comes out is a sob. He needs to stop crying. How can he tell her what's happened if he doesn't stop crying? How can he become a hero if he's sobbing like a baby? But he keeps thinking of Izuku's face when the police showed up, the look of terrible certainty, and he can't stop. "I'm on my way, honey," his mom says. Already he can hear her moving around and gathering up things. "Do I need to call the police?" And no, he manages to squeeze out but nothing else. "I'll be there soon." She's there in half an hour. It's just enough time for him to wash his face a second time and try to swallow the lump in his throat with the help of a glass of water. She pulls him into a hug the moment she finds him, and for once he doesn't fuss or grumble. Her eyes are brimming with worry when she pulls back. He's not the sort of kid who runs to his mother over something petty. What happened, Katsuki? He takes a deep breath. The police came to get Izuku in class, he tells her. And I checked his apartment after school. A villain set it on fire. She hugs him again, fiercely, then stands and pulls out her phone. Katsuki figures she's trying Inko. It rings and goes to voicemail. She tries Inko's office. She tries a third number. Shit, she hisses. Shit. Is Auntie Inko dead? He asks. His voice is small and quiet and he hates it, but it's not something he can shout or demand or laugh out. It's Auntie Inko. It's the woman who takes him and Izuku to get new school clothes together every year, because his mom hates kids' fashion, and who holds his hand in crowds even when he yells at her he's not a baby. She's Katsudon and All Might Band-Aids and Mom's best friend. And she's dead. He asked the question, but he already knows the answer. It's his mom who is still hunting for No, trying to find it by process of elimination, one phone call at a time. I don't know, she says honestly. He's not the kind to cry to mommy, and she isn't the kind to baby him. As much shit as he gives her, he respects her for that. She shouldn't have been at the apartment at all. She and Izuku moved into a hotel months ago. Inko and Izuku moved out? 2 months ago would have been just before summer break, but after Izuku and his big fight. Thinking about the fight makes Katsuki feel sick. Izuku had been acting so strangely for weeks, distant, distracted, secretive. So he'd approached the problem just like he did all problems, aggressively. It had backfired royally, and everything had been a mess after that. Izuku had been so angry with him, and for once not readily forgiven him. Katsuki, frustrated and confused, had kept trying to use the same techniques he'd always used when dealing with Izuku, and only become more frustrated and confused when they continued to backfire. And now here he is, not knowing anything about what had happened to his friend or Inko or what is happening now. His mom keeps making phone calls and checking the news on her computer until Masaru comes home. She tells his dad what is happening and asks him to look after Katsuki while she checks the hotel and the police. I'm coming with you, Katsuki demands. You're sitting your ass on the couch and waiting until I get back. No one is going to tell me anything if I've got a brat next to me, she says bluntly. Izuku's my friend. I'm not just Dash. Don't start this shit with me now. He stops. Not because she's yelling, she's always yelling, but because her eyes are wet and seeing her cry is far more terrifying. The police take him to the station. Not the little neighborhood police office he used to pass on the way to the swimming lessons when he was 6, but Mizutofu headquarters. The one with the jail and detectives and interrogation rooms with one-way mirrors. He doesn't see the jail or an interrogation room, but there is a detective with a quirk that makes him a deep shade of violet. He has an office and uncomfortable plastic chairs that remind Izuku of that day in the principal's. There's a social worker old enough to be Izuku's grandmother who squeezes his shoulder whenever his words just won't come. There's a can of cherry Coke that goes flat before he finishes it and fry bread he can't swallow no matter how much he chews. Questions are asked. He answers what he knows, guessed, and the names of people he thinks might know more. The questions aren't the hard part. The answers are easy. It's the emptiness behind them Izuku can't comprehend. What did it matter when his mother and he moved out of the apartment? Who cared if Hisashi wanted dual custody or not? His mother is dead. Hisashi murdered her. Murdered 2 other residents who happened to be home when he set the entire apartment complex ablaze. What beyond those 3 facts really mattered? Midoriya Hisashi is a villain. Was declared as much the moment the police identified him as the source of the fire, even before they pulled out the bodies. But the detective keeps asking questions. Hours upon hours of questions. The social worker keeps squeezing his shoulder. Your father Dash, the detective starts. He's not my father, Izuku interrupts. By now Hisashi has been referred to as his father no less than 6 times, and Izuku's guts twist each time. I was never that man's son. He's just the villain who murdered my mom. He's just my villain. The detective nods solemnly and refers to him simply as Hisashi or the suspect after that. Mitsuki doesn't call. Katsuki is lying in bed, staring at the ceiling when he hears her finally come home at just past 2 a.m. He gets up, ready to run out to meet her, hoping against hope Izuku is with her. Before he even reaches the door, he hears her sobbing and his father's gentle voice. The next morning, he stays home from school and his mom stays home from work. Both are sleep-deprived and heart-sick. Neither lets themselves cry in front of the other. Inko is dead, his mother tells him, the words leaden on her tongue for all their simplicity. Hisashi escaped during the fire. They still haven't found him. Haven't found him? A fucking C-lister like that? The douchebag barely qualified as a villain. The only reason he isn't classified as a regular criminal is because he used his quirk to start the fire. What the fuck were the police doing? What were the heroes doing for that matter? He was a shitty villain, but still an arsonist and murderer. His mom can read him like a book, not difficult when he's never been shy with his opinions, and mirrors his look of frustration. But until they do, Izuku is being kept in protective custody. I guess Hisashi said some things before he disappeared that make the police think Izuku might be in danger. I don't know where they're keeping him, and I can't bring him home even if I knew. All I can do is apply for guardianship, so when Hisashi is caught, he can come home with us. His chest hurts. It's filled with so many things now, and frustration is the only one he's familiar with. He wants Izuku now. He wants him curled up in his bed, wearing Katsuki's oversized PJs, and clutching one of Katsuki's all-might toys. He wants him sitting in his kitchen, eating the leftovers from last night's dinner Katsuki couldn't bring himself to touch. He wants him hiding in a pillow fort Katsuki makes for him, crying for his mother, but safe and not alone. Because it's not fair. Izuku lost his mother and he's completely alone, while Katsuki still has both of his parents. Why did Katsuki get two good parents and Izuku didn't have either anymore? Izuku didn't do anything wrong. He's a good kid. Nicer than Katsuki. Smarter than all those jerks at school combined. He is too quick to cry and clumsy as fuck, but even quicker to smile and get back up again. Are you okay with that? His mom asks when he simply glares and says nothing. Adopting Izuku? What the fuck kind of stupid question is that? I'll kick your ass if you don't hurry up and get the nerd. Her smile is sad but also a bit proud. And maybe a touch playful. Even if you have to share a room, she asks. If we get bunk beds, I get the top one. The klutz will just fall out of it and bust his head open. And he still has to eat dinner when it's spicy. None of that tasteless crap he likes. The sooner he gets used to it the better. Deal, she agrees. And I'm the older brother, got it? Fine. You are technically older, she concedes because she honestly hadn't expected him to be this accommodating. Her Katsuki enjoyed his space, after all. She should have known better. So, I get first pick of chores and desserts? I'm pretty sure that isn't how it works. And I'm in charge when you're not here. And I want boxing gloves. Why? For when I need to sock the nerd without leaving a mark. You are not punching Izuku with or without gloves. Hey, just because he's my brother doesn't mean I ain't going to pop him one when he gets mouthy. Brothers are allowed to fight. She sighs forlornly. Is this what I have to look forward to? 8 years of you bullying the baby of the family? I'm pretty sure I'll still be able to kick his ass after we graduate high school too. Future pro hero after all. God. I should just put you in the shed in back and let you fend for yourself like the feral Pomeranian you've become. He gives her the finger. She gives him one right back. Something like equanimity is restored to the world. At least Katsuki's world. He's never been one to share, but Izuku has always been the exception. Toys, candy, movies, parents. They had always flowed between them easily in a way Katsuki had never been able to replicate with other kids. Not even his temporary tagalongs could convince him to trade lunches, let alone share an ice cream cone or borrow a toy. Maybe because Izuku's so damn appreciative, like Katsuki's already a pro hero and therefore whatever he touches is already worth its weight in gold. This won't be any different. Izuku doesn't have a mom and dad, so they'll share Katsuki's, and maybe his mom will stop being such a bitch with someone who actually lets her baby them in the house. He's not stupid. He knows sometimes Izuku is going to annoy the fuck out him. When doesn't he? But he can learn to be a little patient and the nerd can learn not to fucking mumble and they'll be okay. They just need to bring him home. 4 days later, and Izuku has all but disappeared. He has no mom, no dad, no friends, no house, no school. There is no one looking for him, waiting for him, or worrying about him. Even the police seem to have lost interest in him. All he has are the uniform to the school he no longer attends, his backpack, and whatever clothes the social workers manage to scrounge up for him. There's a room that's not his and a bed that's not his and angry children who don't care what his name is and adults who speak gently and the exact same way to everyone. The food is tasteless, what little they can coax him to eat, but that's probably not the food's fault. Even drinking water feels like too much of a hassle. The Child Safety and Welfare Commission has kept him tucked away for days now at the behest of the police. Hisashi is a villain who killed his wife, and there's no telling if he will try and target his wife's son as well. But they can't keep him there forever. They tell him they're looking for foster families outside Mizutafu to take him in, somewhere far enough away Hisashi will never find him. Assuming he even cared enough to look. Izuku doubts it. If he just disintegrated into nothing on the spot, how long would it take anyone to notice? Would anyone notice? There isn't anyone left to care. That is good, he supposes. He didn't really exist anymore, so no one had to worry about him or be embarrassed by him or frustrated or inconvenienced. He is just a number on a folder waiting to be filed away. Izuku-kun. He looks up from the book he isn't reading, past the cluster of kids encircling the TV, to the social worker who's been with him since the police station. Futaba-san gives him a smile mild enough to be genuine and gestures for him. He leaves the book and the kids and follows her out into the hallway towards the elevator. "You have a visitor," she says. "The detective?" He can't remember the detective's name. After 4 days of no word, he doubted he would ever see the man again. No, much better than a detective. If she had hoped to cheer him up, she'd be disappointed to know she has only made him uneasy. Unless his visitor miraculously turns out to be his mother and the last 4 days were a horrendous misunderstanding, he isn't terribly interested in seeing anyone. But when they arrive at the lobby and find Endeavor standing at the front desk, he will admit something in his chest expands, driving back despair if only for a moment. Izuku has seen plenty of people larger than this man on the street. Gigantification quirks and physical quirks are some of the most common types out there, but he's never been around a man whose presence dwarfs the very room he's standing in. Even Hisashi, as terrified of him as Izuku had been, never exuded such unaffected superiority. Everyone, Futaba-san, the security officer at the desk, the woman he had never seen before in a black business suit looks tiny next to him. If it had been 5 days ago, the thought of being this close to the #2 hero in Japan, let alone talking to the man, would have left him a ball of nerves and tears. But he's all but disappeared now, not enough left for something as trivial as social anxiety. "Did you catch him, Endeavor?" Izuku asks as he stares up at the behemoth of a man. Cold, blue eyes turn to him, though his hard expression never changes. His social worker and the woman accompanying Endeavor look suddenly as if they would rather be anywhere else. No one says anything for a moment. "I will," Endeavor says finally. "Someday I will find that man." Izuku accepts the promise with a nod. A hero's word is as good as gold. He feels a swell of gratitude towards him, a little too intimidating to have ever been one of his favorites, but still one of the very best. He has no tears left and wouldn't have squandered them on Midoriya Hisashi if he did, so he bows deeply to the hero. "Thank you. Don't thank me, Izuku. It is my duty. He has disgraced the Todoroki clan for the last time. We will not allow this villain to sully our family name any further." Izuku straightens, confusion clear on his face. "You don't know why I am here, do you?" Endeavor asks, scowling at the other adults in irritation before turning back to him without gentling his expression. "Midoriya Hisashi was born Todoroki Hisashi, my younger brother. You are my nephew." Izuku just stares at him in disbelief. It's too morbid to be a joke, but too bizarre to be true. His gaze flits across the hero's face, seeking truth and resemblance. The build is entirely off, but being a pro-hero versus an office worker could account for that. The red hair, yes, but his father's had been curly like Izuku's, not to mention the freckles. It is hard to tell about the face, what with endeavors being literally on fire. The eyes maybe. Yes, the eyes. A hard blue so bright they seem to glow in the shadows of his sockets. It's eerie to see them on two people so profoundly different. Why are you here? He says without meaning to. Because really, why is he here? He had never heard from Endeavor, no, Todoroki NG, or of him from either of his parents, and there must be a reason for that. A reason why Hisashi changed his family name, and such a famous one at that. Is his estranged uncle there to interrogate Izuku like the detective? To seek some clue for the man who tarnished the family name he no longer carries? But when he answers, it only leaves Izuku more lost and confused than before. You are a part of my household now. It takes a little more than just Endeavor's say so to make it official, but not much more. The woman his uncle brought with him, Hanakana Emi, is his personal assistant, and for a man who is #2 pro-hero in Japan and runs his own agency, that meant more than just a glorified secretary. She had an entire briefcase full of documents verifying Izuku's familial connection, applications of legal guardianship, and a lot more he didn't understand and wasn't particularly interested in. While his uncle, Hanakana-san, and the director of the CWSC sorted things out, Futaba-san helps gather up his things and waits with him in the lobby. This is quite fortuitous, she tells him, but also quite strange. It must come as a shock to have such a famous uncle. This is true, but everything about what has happened feels unreal. He knows his mother is dead, has cried just from the knowledge of it, but he has yet to accept it as real in his heart. For days, and a part of him is still waiting for her to walk through the door. 10 years she's been the center of his world. If she were truly gone, wouldn't the entire world have dissolved into nothing around him? The surrealistic appearance of Endeavor into his life is nothing compared to the violent shock of Midoriya Inko stepping out of it. Yeah, is all he has to offer. She squeezes his shoulder and doesn't let go until Endeavor appears trailed by his PA and the director. We're going now, is all the man says on his way towards the door. Izuku barely has time to bow politely to Futaba-san, a meager gesture for all her kindness. There's a car waiting outside with a driver who takes his book bag to put in the trunk and opens the door for him to climb in back with his uncle. Hanakana sits up front with the driver, pulls out a tablet, and gets to work. It's not official, you understand, she says. You have legal guardianship for the time being, but only because you're legally qualified to provide protective custody. There's a ton more paperwork and such to get through before any of this is close to being settled. Then handle it. It's what you're paid for, Endeavor replies. Yes, it's my job, just don't complain when I bring it up again. It's a process, but I don't foresee any problems. Unless there's some family on the mother's side who steps forward. Izuku-kun? I don't think so, ma'am. Mom's parents are dead and she doesn't have any siblings. Just some cousins. I don't remember their names. I'll feel them out later, but I doubt it will be an issue. By the way, since this is technically a protective custody situation, you're being issued an alternative identity by the government. Arataka Izuku, different kanji for your given name. That's the name you'll use when you enroll for your new school and such. Izuku considers. Midoriya is the name his father chose for himself, and aside from his freckles and his curls, the only thing he's ever passed down to Izuku. Vindicatively, he wants to be rid of it forever. Let Hisashi's legacy burn away with the wife he murdered. Can I keep it? He asks. I mean, after Hisashi is caught. Do I get to keep it? If you like, she says. It's a perfectly legal identity. Any protected information attached to it can be declassified later. You will take the Todoroki name, Endeavor states without looking at him. After you reach majority and have proven yourself worthy of it. Izuku's stomach twists. Worthy of being a Todoroki? He'd spent most of his life treated as if he wasn't worthy to exist, let alone be a part of such an old and distinguished family. I'm quirkless, he says. It's best to just lay it out there now. It'll only take a few minutes to drive back, a few more to explain there had been a mistake. But Endeavor doesn't even blink. I'm aware. It's unfortunate, but I'll figure something out. And that's it. It's the least reaction Izuku thinks he's ever gotten. There's almost always some reaction. Disgust. Pity. Discomfort. Something. It's not even feigned nonchalance. Izuku knows what that looks like. His uncle is genuinely indifferent to his nephew's defectiveness. Was apparently aware of his quirklessness before he even came to get him. Izuku feels another swell of gratitude, something like hope. But what does he mean, "I'll figure something out"? Shudo's barely begun his afternoon training exercises when Endeavor makes an unscheduled appearance. Not that Endeavor ever schedules when he will be home, but Shudo usually knows when he won't be around. Weekday afternoons had generally been safe before today. Gomi-sensei warns him in advance before leaving to go speak with his employer, for which Shudo is grateful, but it does nothing to blunt the shard of annoyance that runs through him. What did he want now? It's too much to hope it's not some new scheme to advance his popularity as a future hero. Well, whatever. There isn't anything he could do about it. He continues his exercises while he waits, hoping he can at least avoid a lecture on his lack of discipline or whatever the old man wants to complain about today. Time passes and he moves from one exercise to another. Jump rope, pull-ups, crunches. The rope climb is the most difficult, not because he lacks the upper body strength, but because it's hard to grip the rope tightly enough with only the 3 fingers on his left hand. Still no Endeavor. Maybe he'll leave me alone today. As if he'd jinxed himself, he hears voices a moment later. Engine, this is highly irregular. He hears his Aunt Hanako complain and rolls his eyes. Highly irregular is the catch-all phrase for any and everything Enji does that inconveniences or annoys his aunt, whereas it's unbecoming if it's Shuto or his siblings. For 5 years, she has held the position of governess, acting as the adult supervision for the Todoroki children, and none of them can stand the woman. You should have consulted me before you went ahead with this. I'm the one who's going to have to look after him. Irrationally, Shudo's first thought is Endeavor got them a dog. His second is that if he ever did such a thing it was only so Shudo could kill it and prove he was as much of a heartless bastard as that man. But what comes through the door of the gym, struggling to keep pace with Endeavor's ground-eating stride, is not a dog. It's a boy. Whatever the boy normally looked like, whether handsome or plain, lively or serious, pale or tan, he is ugly right now. His skin has a sickly sheen to it, making the bruises and scabs on his stand out vividly where they peeked out from clothes too big for him. A tangle of green curls frame a round, freckled face, dominated by large eyes dull and deeply shadowed by fatigue. Shudo can't be sure of his age but thinks a year or 2 younger than himself. He has no time to wonder about this stranger's presence before Endeavor makes introductions. Shuto, he snarls, thrusting the boy towards him. The boy looks even more surprised to see him than he does the boy. This is your cousin, Arataka Izuku. He will be staying with us from now on. Shudo doesn't know anyone named Arataka, and Aunt Hanako had been rigorous in imparting his familial connections, though he'd only met a handful and usually only briefly at weddings and funerals. Nothing in his face or coloring, green being rather unique in Japan, is familiar either. It might be a lie, but he can't imagine the purpose of it. His father is an asshole, but child abduction is rather beyond the scope of his usual shittiness. He has no idea what to say. Fortunately, Endeavor isn't interested in a conversation. Izuku. While Shudo is training or studying, you are not to distract him. Run laps until I come back. He all but tosses this Izuku towards the track that encircles the gym. The command is simple, but he looks dazed and confused, his large eyes skittering about the room. But a sharp gesture from Endeavor sends him hurrying towards the track, and the man finally leaves with Aunt Hanako. Shudo resumes his exercises as well, but this new presence is very much the distraction Endeavor wanted him not to be. Izuku is a terrible runner. He's neither fast nor graceful, his limbs flopping about in wasteful motions, his feet slapping noisily. It's clear no one has ever coached him how to run properly or probably trained him at all, if his skinny limbs are any indication. Again, Shudo wonders why he is here. A cousin, Endeavor had said, but that didn't explain anything. Even if it were true, even if there is some reason this kid couldn't stay with his own parents, why had Endeavor been the one to take him in? Both the Todoroki and his mother's Hiroshiba clan were large and generally prosperous, and he doubts his father would have been top of the list for taking in relatives. "Why are you here?" he asks finally as Izuku passes him. He's only done a single lap and already breathing hard. Why did Endeavor bring you here?" he asks again. "You call your dad Endeavor?" He sure as hell doesn't call him dad. Is Izuku trying to distract him? His eyes narrow. The boy looks away. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I didn't even know I had an uncle until a few hours ago. It's weird. Shudo believes him. Everything about him says something awful has happened, recently, from his physical frailty to the dullness in his eyes. He knows what grief looks like. Knows it's difficult to muster dishonesty while in the throes of it. How are you related to Endeavor? Exactly. Despite his heavy breathing and increasingly erratic stride, Izuku's pace quickens. My father is his younger brother. He said my father was disowned, but not why. Disowned. Perhaps that is why Aunt Hanako hadn't mentioned him. Disinheritance is the same as non-existence in her antiquated mind. But it still doesn't explain why he was being taken in. If anything, it's just another reason why Izuku shouldn't be here. The only thing that could possibly motivate Endeavor, Shudo reasons, to take in his disgraced brother's son, is his quirk. If Izuku's quirk were strong enough to rival Shudo's. "What is your quirk?" he asks. He doesn't expect an immediate answer. The boy, his cousin, is struggling to breath now. For a possible rival, his endurance is pitiful. So, he's more than a little surprised when Izuku speeds up. He's still not terribly fast, and his gait is even more absurd, but it is faster. His dull green eyes stare into some distance beyond the walls of the gym, as if he is now racing towards something. "Slow down," Shudo tells him, "you'll make yourself sick." But he doesn't stop. He just keeps going, long after he should have stopped and thrown up. Stop. He demands it now, worry and uncertainty worming its way to the surface. Why was he doing this? What is wrong with him? Maybe this is his quirk? Maybe he can just run forever? But no, Izuku is red and soaked with sweat, heaving for too much air, his endurance all but spent. Izuku suddenly makes a strangled sound, his feet continuing to surge forward even as the rest of him falls back. He doesn't so much collapse as literally runs off his feet. The impact is hard, his head bouncing off floor. Shudo runs over to him, uncertainty turning to fear. Did he just watch someone die? But no, his cousin's eyes are closed, but his body is still heaving with its need for air. Izuku? He doesn't respond. Shudo can see his cousin's eyes have rolled back in his head. He's afraid to touch him, not knowing how badly he is hurt or even what the hell has just happened. "I'm going to get help. Don't move." "Shit, the bastard is home early," Tuya grumbles as they pull up to the house and sees Endeavor's car already parked in the drive. Beside him, Fuyumi and Natsuo give their own exasperated sighs. No one is in the mood to deal with their father, even if dealing with him simply meant staying out of his way. They're lethargic from the summer heat and the long ride home, wanting nothing more than to escape to their respective rooms, change out of their school uniforms, and unwind before dinner and homework. Endeavor's presence, rare this early in the afternoon, will inevitably throw a wrench in those plans. He's never home early unless he needs them for something, attendance at a funeral or a conference or to date some asshole associate's kid for an event. Even if it's a fluke of his schedule and he wants nothing, his mere presence grips the house in tension and doesn't release it until he leaves again. The driver opens the door for Fuyumi, while her brothers don't bother to wait and slide out the other side. Humid summer air engulfs them, rich with the smell of dry grass and the sound of cicadas. The Todoroki estate is part of an enclave of estates nestled in a valley just beyond the city, not exactly country land but carefully cultivated to feel that way. The grounds are extensive, dotted with ponds, groves, and rock formations. The house itself is a sprawling compound of traditional and contemporary buildings bound together harmoniously by the skill of a famous architect. The inside was pragmatically fire-resistant, though more than a few doorways and banisters were branded in fiery handprints. As they enter, they hear the telltale indignation of their aunt. "I am telling you this will not end well. It will only bring shame to this family." The Todoroki siblings share a collective eye roll. Aunt Hanako had said that about everything from Tuya's haircut to setting up Wi-Fi in the house. What do you think she's complaining about now? Tuya sighs as they make their way towards their rooms. Maybe my driving lessons? Fuyumi suggests, though it still boggles her mind that someone could be that old-fashioned. Maybe Endeavor decided to take up knitting, Natsuo suggests. Or macrame. I don't even know what macrame is, Tuya says. Or maybe tatting, his young brother continues. Or quilling. Darning. Shed hunting. LARPing. Did you understand any of that? Tuya asks his sister, who just shrugs. He lost me after macrame. Before they inquire into Natsuo's curious repertoire of obscure hobbies, Shudo appears from the other side of the hall. They all pull up short, even more surprised by Shudo's appearance than their father's. Shudo never left afternoon training until just before dinner to wash up and change. But there he was, barreling towards them with a fearful look on his face that put them all immediately on high alert. Shudo, what a dash, Fuyumi starts, but before she can finish he grabs her wrist and begins pulling her in the direction he just came. Shudo, I don't know what to do. He was just running laps, but then he kept going faster instead of slowing down and then, I think he might have hurt himself. What are you talking about? She almost stops, plants her feet, and jerks her arm free. She hates being dragged. They all hate it, because Endeavor is too impatient to slow his pace for anyone and dislocating a shoulder has always been a real danger. The only thing that stops her is that the hand around her wrist, for all its strength, is shaking. They're at the gym before Shudo has time to offer up a more sensible explanation, and then it proves unnecessary as she spots the child vomiting on the floor. What the fuck, Tuya says, echoing everyone's thoughts at the sight. The child, done vomiting, collapses onto his side, shaking and gasping. He's pale, soaked in sweat, and his eyes have gone glassy. He looks as if he's about ready to die. No wonder Shudo had panicked. The Todorokis crowd around him, careful to avoid the mess. Fuyumi guides him onto his back and starts to check him over. He hit his head when he fell, Shudo says anxiously. She quickly runs her hand over the back of his head looking for an injury. Her hand comes out wet with sweat but clean of blood. It didn't feel swollen, not yet. She pulls open his eyelids to check for dilation, but they're rolled back in his head. He's fainted, she says, and moves to check his pulse and finds his racing. Not surprising if he'd run himself into this state. Who is this kid? Natsuo asks Shudo. Endeavor said he's our cousin. His name is Izuku. They all look up at Shudo in disbelief. He grimaces. That's what he said. I cry bullshit, Natsuo says. He's probably our bastard half-brother or something. Or something, Tuya says, finding absolutely no resemblance to Endeavor in those large eyes and round, freckled. If there is any Todoroki in him, it's blessedly smothered by his other parents' genes. If he's a relation on their mother's side, it's equally obscured. He doesn't know anyone with curls that shade of green. Fuyumi continues to examine him, putting her more extensive first aid training to use. He's exhausted, dehydrated, and overheated, she says. But I don't think he has a concussion. He needs to cool off and rest in a quiet place. Shudo, I want you to go lay out a futon in your room for him. See if you can find him a change of clothes. Tuya, Natsuo, take him to the bath and wash him down in tepid water. Not too cold. Clean him up and see if he comes around. If he does, give him some water, small sips or ice chips, or he might be sick again. What are you going to do? Tusks. I'm going to find out what the hell is going on and calling a doctor. Exhaustion like this doesn't happen from overexerting during a run. We need to make sure there isn't something else going on with him. She leaves her brothers to their respective tasks and goes to find her father. She is not looking forward to it, but it's not something that can be left to her brothers. They are unilaterally incapable of having a conversation with Endeavor. All past attempts have deteriorated into screaming matches and fights they inevitably lose. Fuyumi could at least, generally, make reasonable inquiries and requests and come away with something useful. Endeavor is where they had left him with Aunt Hanako, who has by now given up any attempt to argue with her brother-in-law and employer, as he lists his instructions for this Izuku's care. Homeschool with Shudo for now and keep the same schedule. If he proves distracting or distracted, adjust as needed. Extend him the same budget as the others for clothing and such, but keep a close eye on his purchases. His upbringing has been entirely common. He'll have no sense of restraint or good taste. Fuyumi. What is it? I've just met my cousin, she says, not any more confident in the title than her brothers. He collapsed in the gym. He needs a doctor. Endeavor grunts and turns to Aunt Hanako. Call Dr. Kanawara. The woman bows with stiff formality and leaves father and daughter alone together. They stare at each other for a long moment. It feels strange to Fuyumi, who is only used to his attention in short, intense bursts before he turns it elsewhere. Strange and a little reassuring. Some part of him must know how unsettling this situation is to all of them. Is he really our cousin? She asks bluntly. Yes. What happened to him? Why is he here and not with his parents? He tells her. The uncle, Hisashi, whom she'd never heard of let alone met, disowned for refusal to marry according to their parents' wishes, the name change, the estrangement. Over a decade of silence ending in murder and arson. A mother dead. A father turned villain. A child, her cousin, Izuku, all that's left. It's an ugly story, and one that makes her heart ache with reluctant sympathy. It's easy to pity him, not just from where he came from but also the nightmare he has landed in. The Todoroki household is not any sort of sanctuary for a grieving and traumatized child. He will redeem his father's disgrace. She has no idea what that means. How can anyone be redeemed for something they had no hand in? Uncle Hisashi's mistakes and cruelties are his own and hard enough to redeem even if he were to take responsibility for them. What did Endeavor expect a little thing like Izuku to do about them? But his expectations had always been conflagrated. Look at Shudo, who hadn't had a moment's peace and independence since he was 4. Aunt Hanako returns to inform them of the doctor's estimated arrival time, and Fuyumi uses the distraction to check on her brothers. Shudo has set up the futon and laid out some clothes in his room, and hovers outside the open door of the bathroom. Tuya has stripped down to his briefs to hold up a now-naked Izuku as Natsuo sprays him down. She's relieved to see he's no longer gasping for air, but he still isn't conscious. He looks very small cradled in Tuya's arms. How's he doing? She asks Shudo. He glances up at her before turning back to the bathroom. Tuya thinks he woke up for a second when he was sprayed with water, but then he passed out again. Is he going to die? No, she says with relative certainty. He's just tired. Tired and very sad. What did Endeavor say? Tuya asks as he carefully shifts Izuku's head back so Natsuo can wash his hair. She tells them, not bothering to hold back even for Shudo's sake. He is only 10, but she doubts anything she says will be terribly shocking to him. His training entails case studies of villains, and more than a few start similarly to Hisashi's. They call the doctor. He'll make sure it isn't anything serious. He'll be fine, she finishes. There's a beat of silence. Tuya sighs. And I thought our father was an asshole. I'm pretty sure he still qualifies, Natsuo says. Just a step or two further down the ladder of assholery. Shudo says nothing, his expression hard. His right hand clenches, the fist smaller than it should be without his last 2 fingers. Fuyumi wonders what he is thinking but doesn't ask. Whatever right she had to comfort her baby brother had been lost years ago. They finish washing Izuku, dry him off, and move him Shudo's room. There's nothing left to do, but they're all strangely reluctant to leave him so vulnerable, so they scatter themselves around the room to wait for the doctor. What's going to happen to him? Shudo asks. What's going to happen to any of us? Tuya replies, then after a thought, adds, he might not have our name yet, but he's stuck with the same Todoroki bullshit. We're all in the same boat together. You don't think he'll chuck the kid out the door as soon as he gets annoyed? Natsuo asks. This time Fuyumi answers. The way he talked about him, I think he means to treat him like the rest of us. For good or ill, he's not the sort to change his mind once he's made it up. Izuku's not going anywhere. It's not a reassuring statement however uplifting a stranger might interpret it. Tuya reaches out a hand and runs it through damp verdant curls. Izuku sleeps on, oblivious. Welcome to purgatory, cuz. I'm sure we'll get along just fine. Izuku awakens from one nightmare into another. An infinite string of terrors, some familiar, some novel. Laughter in some, fire in others. When his eyes finally open to darkness, he is certain he is being buried alive. He throws out his arms and feels the right one catch on something and tear with a sharp sting. Something falls and crashes, and he bolts upright but can see nothing. There's a blanket over him, the familiar feeling of a futon beneath him, and for a disorienting moment he thinks he's back at the apartment, in his bedroom, sharing the room with his mom. Then a lamp blazes to life, and Izuku sees a stranger in the bed where his mother should be and screams. He scrambles to his feet, towards the door but hits a desk instead and rears back, realizes this isn't his apartment, isn't his room. He doesn't know where he is. The stranger reaches for him and he rears back, tripping on something, crawls until he finds his feet and the door on the other side of the room. Throwing himself through it, he's once again plunged into darkness. This darkness is not as absolute as before, but a maze of overlapping black silhouettes. Behind him, he can hear the stranger rise to give chase, and he screams again and runs blindly. A long narrow space, bouncing between the walls before it opens wide into a chasm and his hands can find nothing to guide him. But the stranger is right behind him and doors are opening, voices he doesn't know calling out, and he can't slow. He hits something soft and then something hard and then smashes his toe into a sudden rise, cries out in pain, then climbs and hobbles his way over it towards the faint impression of light. To his left he sees a hallway illuminated by moonlight pouring in from floor to ceiling windows. No, not windows. Doors. Sliding glass doors. He fumbles with the latch, thrusts it open. Cool night air rushes over him, sending his bare limbs shivering. 3 limping steps and he's off the veranda and his feet hit grass. Light and shrieking tear through the night, and he's shrieking right along with it, blind and disoriented. 2 more blind steps and the stranger tackles him to the ground. Izuku! Izuku, wake up! He screams and doesn't stop screaming, clawing with his bloodied hand and kicking with his possibly broken toe. But the stranger is heavier, stronger, more practiced in grappling, and within moments he's pinned on his back. Izuku! Izuku! It's Shudo! Your cousin, remember? Shudo! Wake up! His scream turns to a gasp, his eyes focusing, his disoriented brain sloughing the blanket of terror and sleep. Around him alarms are blaring, and below that din the sound of people scrambling around the house. In the blinding floodlights, Shudo stares down at him in bold contrasts of glowing white hair on the right side, and a glowing blue eye shining out from his shadowed left. There is nothing soft or comforting in that preternatural gleam, but in that barely recognizable face he sees the reflection of his own fear and heartbreak staring back at him. Tears well up and spill over. He stills underneath his cousin, feels his arms released, and quickly covers his face with them as he begins to sob. He is awake. He is awake for the first time in days. And the real nightmare is there to greet him. Shudo gets off of him, but he continues to lay there in the cool wet grass and hide behind his arms for a little longer. What happened? Shudo, are you alright? Is Izuku alright? Someone asks, the voice young and feminine. He just had a nightmare and accidentally set off the alarm. Tell security to turn it off. You're bleeding. It's not my blood. He ripped out his fore when he woke up. More people, voices, questions. Someone comes closer and he rolls away and curls up, as if expecting to be hit. Leave him alone, Shudo says. I'll take care of him, just leave him alone for now. The footsteps retreat, the voices linger a little longer then retreat as well. Eventually the floodlights turn off, and Izuku finally pulls his arms away from his face. Inside the house, lights have been left on, and the two of them wait outside as people Izuku doesn't recognize gradually disperse. And then they are alone together, but neither rushes to break the silence. Finally, Izuku turns to Shudo. My father killed my mom. He burned her alive. Shudo turns back to him. He doesn't say I'm sorry or that's awful or anything else equally useless. There is no pity in those dual-colored eyes, but something heavier, more substantial. Understanding, maybe. My father abused and tormented my mom until she went crazy. When I was 6, She used her ice quirk to try and freeze my arm on my left side, my fire side. She intended to shatter it so I would never be able to use my father's fire to hurt anyone. So, I wouldn't have to become a hero. He holds up his left hand, and for the first time Izuku notices the missing fingers. Izuku doesn't feel pity either. There is nothing pitiful about Shuto in this moment. He looks sad, yes, but no less strong for that sadness. He wants to be that strong. When Shuto reaches out a hand, Izuku reaches back for it. Shuto takes Izuku to the bath to wash up for the second time that day. Well, he supposes it's technically the next day now. This time Izuku does much of the work himself, which is good because even as small as his cousin is, Shuto doesn't think he could manhandle him with the same finesse as Tuya or Natsuo. He doesn't have to do much except help locate what the smaller boy needs and slap on a few bandages where Izuku can't reach. Neither has much to say. The revelations in the backyard makes any sort of small talk seem sacrilegious in the aftermath. Shuto still can't believe he said it. It's never something he's had to say to anyone in his household, they all know it, and it's all but forbidden to be spoken of to anyone outside of it. He's never thought that anyone outside of his siblings would truly understand. But Izuku does. He knows he does because he hears the echoes of his own personal tragedy within Izuku's. They are not the same, but they resonate nonetheless. Shuto has cousins, over a dozen he can name off the top of his head, but he had never felt the swell of kinship like he does with Izuku. He looks into the bathroom mirror to watch him brush his teeth, and green eyes catch his gaze and hold it for a split second before he leans forward to spit. Izuku has good eyes. A little red now from crying, a little puffy for the same reason, but the eyes themselves have shed their dull sheen to reveal intent green. They're not Todoroki eyes, narrow and distant. They're wide, bright, intelligent. They're curious and welcoming. A little sad to make it all tolerable. We should get to sleep, Shuto says when at last it seems Izuku has finished. We have to get up in another 2 hours. What time is it? 3:25. His cousin winches. I'm sorry. It's fine. They walk back to his room, and he taps on Tuya and Nara's door when he sees the light is on underneath it. We're going to bed now. There's a muffled night and the light goes out. Back in their own room, they take a few extra minutes to tidy up books Izuku had knocked over and mop up the saline leaking from the overturned four-bag. They settle into their respective beds. I'll leave the lamp on, he says, not wanting a repeat of Izuku's admittedly terrifying panic attack. Shuto is no stranger to nightmares, but he's never seen a nightmare on that scale before and never wants to again. The screaming alone is sure to be fodder for his own malevolent dreams. Hey, Shuto, Izuku says softly, sounding terribly young. Why do you have to get up so early? Is 5:30 early? He asks. The Todoroki household had always risen at 5:30 for as long as he could remember. Well, it's earlier than most of the kids I know. I used to get up at 7 o'clock. When do you go to sleep? 8 o'clock. Wow. Shuto isn't sure why that is a wow-worthy time for sleep. And really, only he went to sleep that early because of his extra training. His older siblings typically stayed up an extra hour or two. He half expects Izuku to keep talking, ask questions, fidget about. But his cousin says nothing more, and when Shuto occasionally opens his eyes to look over at him, he finds him staring motionless at the ceiling. What are you thinking about? He asks before sleep can settle over him again. I was wondering if this is what having a brother is like. Shuto considers. He isn't so sure himself. He had never shared a room with his brothers, never tackled or been tackled in the throes of a nightmare. But there had been bandages applied in the bathroom, entire evenings worth of conversation spoken in 2 minutes, and moments of standing sentry over another's lost dignity. Yes, Shuto says, and nothing more. It wasn't until the night before Katsuki had to return to school that he found Izuku's apology in his bag. He had intended to do the homework he had put off for days, but when he found the All Might figure, his favorite of Izuku's collection, all thoughts of his studies vanished. And then the note, folded into quarters and wedged under All Might's arm. Dear Kaken, I'm sorry I was a jerk. I missed you during vacation. I like you more than All Might. Please, let's be friends again. Your Deku. It's exactly what Katsuki had wanted for weeks now. Not the All Might, although that was a nice touch, but the forgiveness and apology he had been too proud to ask for. If nothing had happened, if Auntie Inko were still safe and Izuku still in school, Katsuki would have taken it and ignored the nerd for a few more days, made him sweat over it for a while, then invited him over on Saturday as if nothing had happened. Life back to normal. But Auntie Inko is dead, Izuku is still gone, and he doubts he'll see him again by Saturday. Nothing feels normal anymore. The old hag spends most of her time outside of work on the phone with the police or CSWC, trying to find Izuku or harassing the detective on Hisashi's case. Detectives work on multiple cases at once, she explained to him, so they have to prioritize. If one case is given more attention than the others, they'll naturally prioritize that one. So you're nagging him so he'll look for Hisashi first, he reasons. Bingo. Same with the CSWC, I have to keep annoying them or they'll drag their feet or just do whatever is most convenient for themselves. I fucking hate bureaucrats. Katsuki hates them too now. It's all so stupid. And cruel. The All Might goes to a place of privilege on his desk, beside his pencil cup, where he can look at him while doing his homework. The note goes on the pin-up board above it, surrounded by blue ribbons for various childish accomplishments and photographs. Izuku is in some of those photographs, looking cheerful and soft and small next to Katsuki. The note is mostly meaningless now. Of course, he forgives Deku. Of course, they're still friends, will be practically brothers when he comes home. But the I like you more than All Might and the your Deku gives him a warm, satisfied feeling like those blue ribbons. He ends up finishing his homework early the next morning, determined not to sulk like a loser over what can't be changed. His dad makes him pancakes for breakfast and packs his lunch, while his mom is busy screaming into the phone. If you don't think Midoriya is in Mizudafu, then why precisely does Izuku have to remain in hiding? And why precisely can't I, who will kick Midoriya's fucking head off his shoulders if I ever see the flaming shitbag, see Izuku? He's my godson, damn it. No, I'm not fucking Catholic, what does that have to do with anything? Katsuki loves his mom. Abstractly he's always known that, but the last few days he's realized exactly what it is about her he loves. She's a fighter. That drives him up the wall most days, because he's a fighter too, so naturally they're always fighting each other. But when they're on the same side of an argument or a challenge, there's no one he'd rather have beside him. As frustrating and sad as things have been, his mom hasn't stopped to let either of them feel sorry for themselves. Oi, Katsuki, she calls as he's about to step out the door. Check with your teacher to see if Izuku's been officially withdrawn from the school. This prick says they're keeping all their options open, but if they've pulled him from school I'll know they're lying. She doesn't cover the phone when she asks him, letting the pricks on the other end know she's not going to let him bullshit her. She really is awesome sometimes. Got it? He says without sass for once and heads out. The walk to school is forgettable. He looks over in the direction of Izuku's apartment once, half expecting to see smoke, but it's nothing but endless blue morning sky. Some of his classmates wave or call out to him when he enters the schoolyard, and he grunts and nods his way through. Goat Eyes and Horns or whatever their names are, his current tagalongs, move in when they spot him. Katsuki. Hey man, are you okay? Horns says. Yeah, why wouldn't I be? You've been gone for days. You've never been absent before, Goat Eyes says, perhaps not unreasonably. It still irritates him. The reason for his absence should be obvious, as well as why he doesn't want it pointed out in the middle of school. Have you heard from Izuku? The teacher won't tell us anything, but I heard some nasty stuff. Katsuki's eyes narrow. What's nasty stuff? The idiots share an uncertain glance. Too late now, fuckers. You wanted to talk about it, so we're talking about it. Like, his dad killed his mom and bunch of other people? And burned down those apartments last week. Isn't that where Izuku lived? Did they seriously not know where Deku lived? Then he remembers the smaller boy never invited them over to his place before, hadn't most of the extras who'd followed Katsuki over the years. It's a privilege he extended almost exclusively to him. Yeah, it was his place, and yeah, his deadbeat trash bag of a sperm donor killed his mom and 2 other people were killed in the fire, he admits reluctantly. He doesn't want to talk about it, but he also doesn't want them spreading something ridiculous like Hisashi killed an entire apartment complex of people. But he also doesn't want his classmates still spouting this bullshit when Izuku returns. His mom was divorcing the prick. He ran off to America for almost a decade and then came slinking back when he lost his job. Fucker must have lost his shit. It's what anyone could have read in the paper and, mostly, Katsuki thinks it's true. There are still questions. Why had Inko been at the apartment after she moved out? Had she been lured there or gone to confront Hisashi? Was it an act of passion or had he planned to murder his wife from the beginning? Where is Hisashi and why couldn't anyone find him? Man, poor Izuku, Goat Eyes says inanely. Have you talked to him at all? Is he alright? We're going to be late for class. He storms off. Class is more of the same bullshit, people asking about him and about Izuku, but Goat Eyes and Horns are there to offer some of the explanations he's no intention of repeating. He's in a bad mood already, and his classmates know to leave him alone. Class is subdued for the day. Someone put a flower in a little vase on Izuku's empty desk, and Katsuki can't help looking at it. A red carnation. Katsuki doesn't know what it symbolizes, or if it symbolizes anything here. Maybe someone just knew red is Deku's favorite color. Aside from a general irritation with the world, Katsuki's day goes by smoothly until afternoon recess. Despite how quiet everyone had been in class, once out of hearing of their teachers, the students quickly turned to gossip. What's going to happen to Midoriya? Does he have to go to an orphanage? I heard they still haven't caught that villain. He could still be running around Mizudafu waiting to start more fires. What if he burns down another apartment but at night? It could be a lot worse next time. I wonder if that kid will ever come back. I don't think I could stand it if everyone knew my dad was a villain. I bet he killed her because she was pregnant. He probably couldn't stand the shame of having another quirkless kid and dash. Katsuki kicks the kid in the face. Not just the side of the head either, but a full-on nose-breaking blow that sends the brat sprawling in a spray of blood. Then he kicks him 3 more times in the stomach and would have kicked him a 4th, but Goat Eyes and Horns pull him off first. You fucking shit sack. That quirkless nerd is worth 1,000 of you. I hope Hisashi finds you first and you see how much you have in common with the quirkest fucker before he roasts your shitty ass. He doesn't know if the brat hears him or not. He's still wailing and rolling around on the ground as if he's dying. But everyone else in the schoolyard hears him, kids and teachers alike shrinking away from his rage. Turns to them. And don't any of you fuckers act like you're any better. You were assholes to him before and you're still a bunch of assholes now. Your fake pity makes me want to puke. After that, his dad has to come pick him up from school. Katsuki would have preferred his mom, who probably would have had a few choice words of her own for the shitty brat he'd clobbered, but his dad does okay in his own way. He apologizes for Katsuki's outburst, says this has obviously been a more traumatizing event than his parents realized. Would the school have any recommendations for counseling, etc.? He's so damn fucking reasonable that Katsuki's second suspension that year is negotiated down to a written apology and some sessions with the school counselor. That the shitty brat also has to write an apology letter and speak to the counselor at least once is just fucking icing on the cake. The school day is almost over anyway, so Masaru takes him home. You're a good friend, his dad says on the way back, ruffling his hair and smiling gently at him. Izuku is lucky to have you. It's all he says. He doesn't scold him for fighting or ask for an apology for making him miss work. His dad, he decides, is pretty cool in his own way too. Shudo's barely drifted off when it seems like Aunt Hanako is pounding on his door to get up again. He's still tired from the night's interruption, but there's no point complaining. Endeavor doesn't care about that sort of thing, so Aunt Hanako doesn't either. Izuku is still sleeping, oblivious to the summons, and he lets him rest. It might be Izuku's fault he's tired now, but it's hard to resent him when he can still see the shadows under his eyes. The doctor had said his condition wasn't serious, but he'd given him a saline drip and said he should be allowed to sleep as much as he wanted for the next few days. He hadn't moved at all when the doctor examined him except the slight twitch across his brow when the 4 had been inserted, and if Shudo didn't know better, he appeared not to have moved since. He changes into his morning workout clothes and joins his siblings for breakfast, all similarly dressed for morning training. How is he? Fuyumi asks as he takes a seat. Sleeping. I don't think he'll wake up again for a while. No more nightmares? Not that I can tell, but I didn't notice before either. I left a light on for him. Good thinking. It must have been very scary waking somewhere he didn't recognize after a nightmare. Shudo hadn't thought of it that way. He had just assumed Izuku had exceptionally bad nightmares, but perhaps it was the circumstances. He tried to imagine what it would be like to wake up in a room you didn't recognize. Yes, that would be scary all on its own. Especially if it was beside a person you didn't immediately recognize. Could it happen again? How long would it take before his cousin recognizes the room upon waking? Ahem. He's pulled from his musing by Aunt Hanako hovering by the breakfast table. He's ready to tune her out again, but the subject turns out to be relevant for once. Arataka-kun, she begins, will be staying with us, as you know. As such, there are certain things you should know about him and what expectations your father has for him. Shudo would hopefully learn why Izuku had been taken in by his father, whether in fact he was some sort of live-in rival or something else altogether. Around the table, his siblings give their aunt their full attention. Firstly, his birth name is Midoriya Izuku, but he is using a pseudonym for the sake of his privacy and safety. As Fuyumi has likely already explained, his father, your uncle, has been officially classified as a villain and genuine threat to his safety. Therefore, in addition to his new name, which all of you are expected to use, he will not be attending school but take lessons with Shudo. In fact, for the time being, he will be keeping Shudo's schedule for training and tutoring with the exception of quirk exercises. Shudo isn't sure what that is. Good? Bad? When he was younger, he would have done anything to have someone else with him after his brothers and sister left for school. The days had been unbearably lonely and tedious, and even when they were around there were few opportunities to spend time with them. But gradually he had gotten used to it, been able to focus past the loneliness on whatever task lay in front of him. Now, at last, it seems he'll have a companion, but again if he was meant to be a rival. Why not quirk exercises? Natsuo asks. That is the second matter you should be made aware of. Arataka-kun is entirely quirkless. Oh good. Not a rival after all. Tuya must think so too because his only response is a muttered, there might just be a merciful god after all. Natsuo and Fuyumi's reactions are more puzzled than anything. Seriously? That's so rare for someone his age. I never met anyone quirkless until high school, his sister says. Yeah. Was his mom quirkless? Natsuo asks. I'm sure I don't know, Aunt Hanako says disinterestedly. Probably. He certainly didn't get it from the Todorokis side of the family. I'm pretty sure he didn't get it from either side of the family. That's sort of the point. He's a default mode human being, Natsuo says thoughtfully. Default mode human being. Shudo wonders what that is like, to not have a quirk. To be nothing more or less than human. It might be nice, he thinks. His own quirk has brought him nothing but hardship, and his siblings' quirks only disappointment. But Todorokis are different from most people. For someone who wasn't raised within the family, it might mean something else entirely. Why did Endeavor take him in? Shudo asks. Aunt Hanako sniffs. I'm sure I don't know that either. He hasn't seen fit to inform me of his reasoning, just that it would be so. Publicity, I'm assuming. Taking in some quirkless orphans certainly does something for his hero image. It doesn't get any more pathetic than that. I'm pretty sure I can think of a lot of things more pathetic than that, Tuya mutters. Is it pathetic? Shudo asks his siblings. He knows not to trust his aunt's judgment on something like this. She's insane. No, Fuyumi says sharply. There's nothing wrong with being quirkless. It isn't something to be proud of either, Aunt Hanako says. On top of everything else he has going against him, I don't see Arataka-kun amounting to much. You would do best to avoid him as much as possible while he is here. Hopefully, Endeavor will see reason soon and have him board at school as soon as he's old enough. Shudo is about to ask the others if that's likely, but Tuya startles them all by slamming the table with his fist and snarling. Watch your mouth, bitch. He might not be any relation of yours, but he's my cousin and you will not speak so disrespectfully of him or to him. He's part of the Todoroki household and you're just an overpaid nanny with delusions of grandeur. For half a moment all anyone can do is gape at him. Tuya can be rude, snarky, and snide but he's never this confrontational. Titia. How dare you speak to me that way? Wait until your father hears of this. Rather than cowing her rebellious nephew, his irritation only escalates to full-on rage. He leaps up from his chair. We may have to obey your rules because of that walking dumpster fire, but if you think either of you are any position to dictate proper behavior to us, I would recommend you both go to a doctor to get your memories checked. Clearly, senility has begun to set in early. Natsuo bursts out laughing. Tuya's arm catches fire. Everyone is on their feet in an instant, but Natsuo is closest and throws his left hand over his brother's right arm, smothering the flames with a burst of snow. Are you all right? Do you need a first aid kit? Fuyumi asks. Tuya, still annoyed, glares at her. It's a little late for you to start getting motherly now. Tuya, Natsuo snaps. I know you're a fucking emo, but don't be a dick. He looks away, the fight finally smothered out of him. Gingerly, he extracts his hand from his brother's, a little red from the fire or the ice or both. Sorry, he says to his sister, before coolly addressing his aunt, I think we're all just a little tired and short-tempered after last night. Both of us have been rather indelicate with our choice of words. If you'll excuse me, I think I need a minute to myself. Get out of here, you posh-talking bastard. We'll see you at training, Natsuo says. He leaves the table, breakfast only half eaten, and storms off. No one else wants to talk after that, particularly not Aunt Hanako after so many insults and the less than sincere apology. Shudo's doesn't spare her much thought. She's always been an elitist nag, and he's learnt long ago not take anything she says seriously. His thoughts are now fixated on Tuya, both his unexpected defensiveness towards their new cousin and his quirk accident. Tuya hasn't so much as spoken to Izuku yet, and he's already claiming him, pulling him into the protective circle of siblings that formed after their mother's disappearance. Shudo is both relieved and a little jealous. The 3 remaining fingers of his left hand twitch. Shudo had to do a lot more than simply show up to earn that sort of inclusion. The fire, it's not the first accident Tuya's had. Not even the second or third in the last year. Rather than maturing into his quirk, he seems to be regressing, losing control during moments of anger or distraction, both of which are occurring more frequently. Shudo never says it out loud, but sometimes he wonders if Tuya hadn't inherited some of their mother's instability, that one day he's just going to snap and rather than hurt them, he's never hurt his siblings with his quirk accidentally or otherwise, he'll hurt himself. Natsuo and Fuyumi laugh it off as puberty, but he knows they're worried too. Even more worried that Endeavor will soon take matters into his own hands and make everything worse. It's just past 2 when Izuku finally wakes up. He's alone, Shudo's bed empty and neatly made, the lamp still on even with light streaming between the curtains of the window. He turns off the light and opens the curtain to see an interior courtyard with a little waterfall and koi pond. It's beautiful but boggles his mind that the house is large enough to have a garden inside of it. By the door he finds food has been left on a tray for him, along with a set of clothes and a note. Todorokis, please eat this when you wake up and change into the clothes provided. Rest until you are summoned and introductions to the remainder of the household can be completed. And that's it. Not even a signature. Who is the remainder of the household? Not Mrs. Todoroki, obviously. It's still early in the afternoon, so whoever they are, they must either be at work or school. Which meant Shudo is probably at school too. His toe and shins throb where he'd hit them last night, and the rest of him feels stiff and tender. Despite all the sleep he feels lethargic. But he also feels painfully awake. Yesterday's realization hasn't left him. He is never going to see his mom again. He had thought if she were truly dead his world would completely dissolve around him, and now it has. A new home, new family, new life. And not necessarily a better one. Shudo's words about his father ring in his head like an alarm. Has he somehow exchanged one Hisashi for another? He believes his cousin. How could he not with those 2 missing fingers? But he can't accept it either. How could a man who abused his wife into insanity turn around and adopt a quirkless nephew he's never met? Even if there weren't any sympathy involved, there had to be some sense of duty or honor. What would he do if the worst turned out to be true? What if his uncle only took him in as another victim to abuse? Izuku clenches his fists. He refused to be a victim again. His mom died trying to make sure Hisashi could not make him one. She had been brave and strong for him. Now she is gone, and he'll have to be those things for himself. And for Shudo. Even if Izuku dies too. He's known for a long time now he needs to be tougher, to stop crying so much and stand up for himself. To stop letting others use his quirklessness as an excuse to hold him back. There would be no better chance than now, with Midoriya Izuku filed away in some cabinet at the CSWC, and Arataka Izuku walking the world in his place. He goes to the bathroom, takes another shower and brushes his teeth with the supplies Shudo showed him last night. The clothes provided are designed for exercise and someone several inches taller than him, but he manages to keep the shorts on with the help of a drawstring. He finds a comb and untangles the worst of his knotted curls. He looks at his reflection. What stares back at him doesn't look like Midoriya Izuku. Oh, it had his curls and freckles and disappointing height, but it didn't really look like him. This reflection's eyes are bright but shadowed, the shape of his face somehow leaner, the mouth doesn't look right at all. You need to smile. The bravest heroes smile. He grins. Not too much. He just looks crazy. A little less. With teeth? Too much teeth. Now his eyes are too narrow. But if he widens them too much, he looks crazy again. A proper smile is harder than he realized. Maybe he should laugh? Photographers always try to make you laugh just before they took your picture. He tries his best all might, puffing his chest, his arms akimbo. Ha ha. That's it. What are you doing? Izuku shrieks in fright. Shudo is standing in the doorway, watching him expressionlessly. He flushes in embarrassment. I was just giving myself a little pep talk, he says. Pep talk? What's a pep talk? Is Shudo being serious or teasing him? It's hard to tell with his cousin. You know what a pep talk is, right? When you encourage yourself or someone else before starting something. You know, to get excited or focused. Shudo just looks at him blankly. Oh, an awkward moment stretches between them. Why aren't you in school? I homeschool, Shudo says. If you're up now, Gomiai-sensei wants to see you in the gym. Gomiai-sensei? Is he your tutor? He's our martial arts instructor and trainer. He wants a look at you before he designs a training schedule. I have a trainer now? Well, that's convenient. Mom had never had the extra money for martial arts lessons, and he'd never had the nerve to intentionally get into fights. But Arataka Izuku is a new man. He's brave and proud and is going to learn how to punch villains in the face. Shudo leads him back to the gym. There is a man Izuku hadn't met before, large and muscular in black workout clothes. His arms and hands are heavily scarred, varying in size, age, texture. You're late, he says as they enter. He was pep-talking, Shudo says, and Izuku wants to cry. Gomiai-sensei gives him an odd look but dismisses it with a shrug. Arataka-kun, I'm Gomiai Sanjiro. I work as part of personal security for the Todoroki family, including as martial arts trainer. You will call me Gomiai-sensei when we are in the gym and Gomiai-san when we are out in public. Yes, Gomiai-sensei. Izuku says and bows what he thinks is correct. Gomiai-sensei's hard expression softens a bit in the face of his enthusiasm. For morning training, I'll have you work on basic physical fitness with Shudo, while I help the others with their martial arts. In the afternoon, I'll work with you on martial arts and self-defense. Endeavor informed me you are quirkless, so once you are ready, we'll incorporate weapons training with another instructor. Weapons training? What kind of weapons? Izuku is familiar with several capture weapons, or really the heroes who use them, but he doesn't think that is what Gomiai is talking about. Is this the I'll think of something his uncle was talking about? Yes, Gomiai-sensei. Good. Today, however, I will be doing an assessment to see where you are and how to catch you up with Shudo, he says, before tossing out to his cousin. Go through your katas for now, then take your pick of equipment. If there's time, we'll do some sparring at the end. Sensei. Shudo walks over to a large mat, falling into a series of stretches that eventually falls into a series of katas. Izuku can't help turning to watch him, admiring his physical strength and grace. He wants to be that. Even if he can't have a quirk, he wants to be that at ease in his own body. He forces himself to concentrate on Gomiai, who is doing his assessment. He is led through a series of stretches and simple exercises, nothing Izuku isn't familiar with from school workouts, except his instructor keeps a hand somewhere on him at all times, his arm or back or even the top of his head, not exerting pressure, but constantly there. He only releases him when Izuku does a sprint test and a lap around the room, and then the hand returns to his shoulder as he waits to catch his breath. Izuku thinks the touchiness must relate to a quirk, which Gomi confirms shortly after. My quirk is touch assessment, he explains. I am able to determine the physical state of living things by touching them. Strengths, weaknesses, injuries or diseases, even quirks if they're physically based. Izuku's eyes light up. That's so cool. You can do so much with a quirk like that. You can tell what your opponent's weaknesses are and when they're ready to surrender or are just waiting for another opportunity. And when you do rescues, you know immediately who is most seriously injured and how bad, even if they're unconscious or in too much shock to know themselves. Oh, but the touching part must have been tricky for fighting villains. You would have to get close to use it after all, and that's always risky. You must have really good reflexes. Does it work on yourself? Can you tell when you're overworking yourself or how seriously you're injured? Like if you got cut, would you know how much longer you could continue fighting before you became too slow or weak? He gushes before it ends up trailing off into an extended mutter. Gomi just stares at him for a full minute, trying to unpack what had just been spewed at him but only becoming more deeply buried as Izuku keeps going. Finally, he holds up his hand. Izuku stiffens. Sorry, sensei. I didn't mean to interrupt. It's fine. More importantly, how did you know I used to be a pro hero? Izuku blinks. Well, what else was the man supposed to have been? Your arms, he says, pointing to the scars. Those are the arms of someone who fought to save a lot of people. The man stares at his arms as if only just noticing the telltale marks. A Yakuza might have scars like this. No tattoos, Izuku reasons. A villain? Heroes don't cut up villains like this, and these scars were made by different wounds over a long period of time. I don't know for certain, but I don't think villains fight each other this frequently. Underground cage fighting. Now Izuku knows he's being teased. With a flamethrower, he says, pointing out a particularly nasty burn. Besides, I don't think Uncle would hire an underground cage fighting Yakuza villain as part of his security. The man throws up his hands in defeat. You've got me. I was a pro. That was pretty observant for a kid your age. Like you said, fighting villains proved problematic. I had to retire early. But that's neither here nor there. What I was trying to say before we got off track is that my quirk is ideal for training. I know not only where you are at, but also how much you can be pushed without risking exhaustion or injury, where your physical potential lies. Izuku stares at him intently, riveted. Dread and longing fill his chest. Can he be a hero? Does he have that potential inside him? Perhaps that's not something Gomi can answer, not yet, but he could tell him if he has potential. I'll give it to you straight. You aren't ever going to bulk up like your uncle. Genetics just didn't favor you that way. You're on the shorter side of average and therefore have a lighter build, so fist fighting and grappling aren't going to be your forte. You aren't ever going to be a brawler. Izuku swallowed thickly. It's disappointing but not unexpected news. Izuku has always been one of the smallest boys in class, last to be picked and first to be picked on because of it. But he had always hoped he was just a late bloomer, that he'd hit puberty and shoot up like bamboo. It seems it was too much to hope for. The good news, Gomi continues, is you've got sprinter's legs and a very sturdy frame. That means, with practice, you'll go faster sooner than most, and your body will be able to withstand getting hit harder without serious injury. Endurance, flexibility, strength, balance, all those can be achieved through practice and exercise. So, we'll focus on jiu-jitsu and aikido for now. Izuku grins, and he doesn't have to fake it. He's going to learn how to fight, to protect himself and others. He can get tougher. Gomi says he's built to take a hit. After that, his instructor walks him back through the same exercises again, correcting his form and showing him how to breath most effectively for each one. Who knew there were so many ways to breath? Or that running was actually really complicated? By the end of the session, he's gasping and his newly loosened muscles are aching all over again. But he still can't stop smiling. That's as much as I want to push you today, Gomiai tells him as he guides him through cool-down exercises. I want some of those bruises to heal up before I start having you kicking or punching anything, and I recommend you nap at least once a day until I say otherwise. You don't have the metabolism to handle the level of physical activity I'm going to put you through yet, so you'll need more rest than Shudo. Yes, Gomiai-sensei. Thank you. Alright, sit down and drink some water. Shudo and I are going to spar. Feel free to watch, see what those observation skills of yours pick up. Just remember, he's going to be using different fighting styles than you. Izuku's happiness with his assessment dims somewhat while watching Shudo and Gomiai spar. There's a lot of hard kicking and punching and grappling, all the things Izuku isn't going to be talented in. They're quick, powerful moves, blows Izuku is certain would lay him flat, they both shrug off. Even with his cousin less than half his instructor's size, he still seems to hold his own as he hurls himself at the man over and over. It's only about 15 minutes, but he feels exhausted just watching them. How is he ever going to be able to do something like that? He starts to wonder if Kaken could win against Shudo. Kaken is strong, fast, and nimble but lacks formal training. Not knowing what Shudo's quirk is, he can't be sure who would have the advantage there either. Perhaps Kaken would lose, at least at first, but as soon as his friend realized he had a weakness he would do anything and everything to overcome it. He loves challenges after all, the harder the better. Izuku's heart aches when he thinks of him. That he might never see him again or that he hadn't forgiven him in the end. His eyes begin to water. You have to smile. Kaken would call you a baby if he saw you crying over nothing. The smile helps. It feels a little stiff and his eyes feel swollen, but no tears fall. That's right, he's not going to feel sorry for himself. Gomiai said he could do something so he is going to do it and not worry about what he can't. When training is over, their instructor releases them for the day and Shudo shows him the locker room where they can shower and change. You are really cool, Izuku says to his cousin. I've never seen anyone our age move that fast. Shudo looks surprised by the compliment and turns away, red-faced. I'm not that good. Fuyumi and Tuya are way better than me at this sort of thing, and Natsuo can block just about anything. Who are they? His cousin looks back, surprised for a second time, but then realizes something. You wouldn't remember them, since you were unconscious. They're my older brothers and sister. Shudo gives him a brief description of each, enough for him to put names to faces when he finally meets them. It hadn't occurred to Izuku that he might have more cousins, and certainly not 3 more. It makes him a little nervous. Shudo and he seemed to get along, but now there were 3 more strangers he would have to contend with. 3 strangers who were better fighters than Shudo. How come they're not here now, he asks. They go to school. They'll be back this afternoon. But you don't go? Shudo's expression hardens instantly. Endeavor insists school would only be a distraction from training. Izuku isn't sure he should ask any more. It's obviously a sensitive subject for his cousin, but he's been left with more questions than answer. What are you training for that they aren't? To be the next number 1 pro hero. Izuku's eyes widen even as Shudo's narrow. The pro hero? The next number 1 pro hero for that matter? That is an insane level of ambition, but perhaps for the number 2 pro hero in Japan it didn't seem so. That's amazing. That's a lot of dedication. It's not like I was given a choice in the matter. Endeavor chose me as his successor because my quirk is the only one suitable. You don't want to be a hero? Shudo freezes, his hard expression cracking, confusion leaking through. It's not. I do actually, it's just. You don't want to be a hero like Endeavor? Izuku guesses. Shudo sighs and nods, clearly relieved for such quick understanding. Izuku smiles at him. What sort of hero do you want to be like? After a long moment of consideration, Shudo answers, I don't know. I don't really know that many pro heroes, but the one who always sticks out in my mind. When I was little, before my mom disappeared, one of my favorite memories of her is watching All Might on the TV together. She'd wrap her arm around my shoulder and point to him on the screen and say, "You'll be a hero like that one day." So if I had to choose, I guess it would be All Might. Yes. Izuku cries, throwing his fist in the air and scaring the daylights out of his cousin. All Might is my absolute favorite too. Heroes who save others with a smile are the coolest. Ha ha. Shudo's eyes widen and for the first time his hardened expression breaks. His gaping mouth closes, curls slowly upwards, and mirth bubbles up from his throat. A little giggle at first, but it soon escalates into a full-blown laugh. Izuku pulls his All Might pose and laughs along with him, which only makes his cousin lose it completely, laughing until he's crying. It feels good. It feels so good to see Shudo laugh, because even if they've known each other less than a day, Izuku knows it's something rare and precious. Eventually, they both calm down enough to speak. All Might is definitely the best. Shudo agrees a little breathless, struggling to get himself back under control, but don't ever let Endeavor hear you say that. He absolutely despises All Might. What? No way. Why? Because the only reason Endeavor has never been number one in the hero rankings is because All Might beat him to it and never moved since. It's why he's so fanatical about me becoming number one in his place. Izuku sort of understands. Not that part about Shudo being number one in his place, because that doesn't make any sense, but the rankings. Pro hero is a super competitive profession and those hero rankings weren't just ego boosters. They determined everything from your pay scale to who could open their own hero agency. But once you got into the top 20, it struck Izuku as kind of petty to care very much. Yes, it's nice to be acknowledged and admired for your work, but constantly aiming for number one just seemed like someone needing to prove their own superiority. All Might is different. He isn't number one because he's aiming for it, he's number one because he's always been the ideal pro hero. He's known for being extra supportive of up-and-coming heroes and generous with his praises for those he works with. Some people call him pompous, but Izuku thinks it's well-earned confidence and that it's reassuring to hear that confidence for those who are in trouble. You know, I used to have a huge All Might collection, Izuku says with a sigh. I don't know what will happen to it now, but maybe it's a good thing I couldn't bring it with me. Hisashi tried to make me throw it out once and I thought I was going to die. I don't think I could handle Uncle Enji making me do the same thing. He just set it on fire, Shudo says grimly. Yeah, that's what Hisashi said he'd do too. Except Endeavor really would set it on fire. At least, he didn't set your mom on fire. And they really needed to take this conversation in a new direction. He plasters on his smile. Alright, there's no point in being sad about it. It's out there somewhere not being set on fire. Maybe I'll see it again someday or maybe I won't. Let's do something else about it today. Like what? Let's form a club. The Secret All Might Hero Appreciation Club. Current members, 2. For once, Tuya is eager to return home. It's not that he particularly likes school. His classmates at Sumai High School are mostly tedious and the classes themselves are just something to slog through, but there's a comfort to the tedium. Home is a roulette wheel. There are good days. Days when Endeavor is gone, when Aunt Hanako keeps her bigotry to herself, when the sight of Shudo's truncated fingers don't fill him with despair. On those days when it's just his siblings and him eating a meal together or training together or just sitting out on the veranda together, he feels almost happy. But those days are so rare, he no longer allows himself to hope for them. It just makes all the other days that much harder. But today, there is someone rather, waiting at home that's been on his mind all day. Izuku was still sleeping and oblivious to the world when they'd left that morning, leaving him in the dubious care of Aunt Hanako and Shudo, whose understanding of social cues is decidedly spotty. Endeavor left the day before, but Tuya can only pray he'll remain scarce until he can prep the newest member of the household on what to expect. And what not to. I'm sure he's fine, Fuyumi says on the drive back. Natsuo agrees with her. Sarcastically. Yeah. I mean, what's the worst that could happen to a traumatized 10-year-old in a strange mansion surrounded by a woman who doesn't think he should exist, a cousin with no facial expressions, and security guards who all look like escaped convicts? Don't tell Gomiya-sensei I said that by the way. Seriously, this is like the setup for a horror movie. But it's not a horror movie, so again, I'm sure he's fine, she reiterates, this time with a warning edge. There's no way to truly know until they're home. Hence, his eagerness. The first signs upon pulling up to the house are good. Endeavor's car is still nowhere to be seen and security isn't there to warn them of any mishap. Aunt Hanako is there to welcome them with a dour expression, which meant nothing as she always looks that way. Where's Izuku? Tuya asks without preamble. Her mouth pinches in disapproval. I'm sure I don't know. After training, the boy wanted to explore and dragged Shudo along with him. I believe they're canoodling about the grounds somewhere. That didn't sound so bad. Certainly not urgent. His siblings and he took time to change out of their uniforms into cooler, more comfortable clothes before checking with security. Gomiai is there and says security cameras had them playing by the old duck pond. Playing? Did Shudo even know how to play anymore? Yes, apparently he did. They find the boys a ways from the duck pond in the far north corner of the grounds, tucked behind some shrubs to hide from the security cameras. They're making a snowman, or really, an ice sculpture, Shudo providing the large lump of ice and the heat to shape it, and Izuku what amounts to artistic skill in a 10-year-old. Tuya and his siblings come up on them quietly, watching with growing amusement and wonder. Okay, like that. Now make his eyes a little narrower, and his mouth a little wider. No, wider. Wider. Izuku insists. His jaw is going to fall off, Shudo says. We'll come back to it. I think his legs are starting to melt. Can you refreeze them so he doesn't fall over? Got it? Whatever Tuya was expecting of the frail, seeming half-dead child they'd nursed last night, it wasn't this. He looks like an entirely different person. Izuku still looks tired and banged up. There are shadows under his eyes and his movements are slow and cautious, but his pallor is healthy and his green eyes are bright and clear. He looks like a happy, innocent child. More surprising than that is Shudo looks like a happy, innocent child standing next to him. Playing. He turns to his siblings who look as surprised as he does. Is even a little misty-eyed. Oh my God, Fuyumi murmurs, a grin spreading across her face. That's All Might. No, Natsuo says, disbelieving. But as they all turn back to study the ice sculpture, it quickly becomes recognizably the #1 pro hero. Even if it's hilariously bad. His oversized chest and akimbo arms look like a confused teapot sitting on a pair of tree trunks, and his trademark bangs are pointed up like old TV antennae. I need a picture of this, Natsuo says, pulling out his phone before calling out, say cheese. The two young sculptors spin around just in time for Natsuo to catch their startled expressions in all their pixelated glory forever. Shudo is clearly unamused. Izuku looks like they've been caught defacing the Mona Lisa. It's a rabbit. I swear, it's a rabbit, he cries. Natsuo mimics the pose of the sculpture and grins like an idiot. There's no need to fear, for I am here to tell you that is awesome. And also, not a rabbit? It is so. Shudo, tell him. It's a rabbit? Then why is it grinning? It's a happy rabbit? Natsuo and Fuyumi laugh and even Tuya feels a smile coming on. It is disgustingly cute. Shudo finally made a friend, and he actually gets to keep him. After a little more teasing and stubborn denials, they call a stalemate. We haven't officially been introduced, Natsuo says. I told him who you are, Shudo says. It's still not an introduction if we're not there when you do it. Fuyumi, Tuya, Natsuo. He points to them as he states their name. Okay, just stand there and be pretty for a few minutes. We'll show you what a real introduction actually looks like. They exchange names, properly, with kanji spelling, and shake hands. Izuku's hands are delicate and soft, so easily crushed by his own, calloused and strong from training and old burns. I'm Arataka Izuku, but I don't know the kanji for it yet. Nice to meet you, he says with a grin. Fuck, he's adorable, Natsuo mutters. Those freckles. Tuya can't disagree. Everything about Arataka Izuku is adorable. His round cheeks, his big eyes, his little body practically swimming in Shudo's clothes. He looks like a fluffy bunny left to a family of foxes. I'm sorry about all the trouble I caused, Izuku continues, his sheepish expression only making the impression worse. I promise it won't happen again. Which part? The passed out half dead in the gym or setting off the alarms at 3 in the morning? Because if it's the first part, you clearly haven't met Gomiai-sensei yet. Fuyumi slaps him upside the head. Ignore him. He only thinks he's funny. Not my fault my siblings include an emo, a tsundere, and a child robot. That's a tough crowd to play to. Natsuo dodges the second swat from his sister, only to step into the path of one from Tuya. Anyway, she says, turning her attention back to Izuku. I'm glad that you and Shudo are getting along. Did he tell you you're sharing a room now? Why yes. We haven't figured out where to store the futon when I'm not using it though, their cousin says a little uncertainly. Not only that, there's your clothes, study desk, and such to worry about as well. The whole room will probably have to be reorganized. Your room is smaller than Tuya and Natsuo's though. Perhaps if we move the desks to another room and get you a proper bed with storage underneath like Shudo's? Izuku stares at her with wide eyes. That's really not necessary. I can just study at the kitchen table, and I barely own anything now anyway. That's right. You're going to need a new wardrobe too. It's hot now, but fall is right around the corner. Plus, you're going to need workout clothes the right size or they will get in the way. And you're going to start accumulating things of your own pretty quickly, books and odds and ends. Yes, we're going to have to completely rearrange your guys' room to make space. Maybe add a wall shelf. Definitely clean out the closet. You don't have to, I'm sure. I'm sure the police will release some of my stuff soon. They don't need my clothes or anything. It's fine, Shudo says even as Izuku looks ready to protest again. It's fine, Fuyumi insists. It's fine, Natsuo agrees. Don't bother arguing, Tuya says. If you don't do it with us, Endeavor will have Aunt Hanako do it anyway and she will complain about it. Plus, her fashion sense is shit. There's a reason she only wears a kimono around the house. Izuku sighs. But just let's not go crazy with this. Just the basics please. Of course. Fuyumi says, a smile spreading across her face. The best stuff we wait to get during our winter and summer break shopping trips. Some stuff you really need to see in person to buy. Well, let's get started. Started? Izuku asks uncertainly. You two have been goofing off long enough, she says. It's time to get to work. Shudo, you need to clean out your closet. Tuya and Natsuo will find another place for you both to study. And Izuku and I will get to work ordering what he needs. They return to the house and get to work. Fuyumi and Izuku sit together on Shudo's bed, using Fuyumi's laptop to order one thing after another, while their youngest brother goes through his closet. Natsuo and he spend the next few hours cleaning out an extra storage room too narrow to be used as a bedroom. It's not hard work, but it does take a lot of time finding new places for everything. Tuya finds he doesn't mind. He feels a mounting restlessness and the constant wandering back and forth helps keep it from turning to frustration. What are they doing? Really, what the hell are any of them doing? Since when does Shudo play? It's true he'd done so before his quirk emerged, before Endeavor dragged him away for hours, leaving him too exhausted or hurt to do anything for days afterwards. Even after Ray disappeared and by some perversity the bastard was absent more, Shudo hadn't shown any desire to spend his free time frivolously or in his siblings' company. They were all close. In a way, shared trauma makes people close, but they had never been entirely comfortable with Shudo. Had it truly been a lack of desire or simply a lack of opportunity? Had Shudo sensed the distance between them? Now here, a cousin the same age, different but equitable trauma, sharing close quarters. Was this that unforeseen opportunity none of them had been looking for? And when had Fuyumi ever looked after someone? After their mother disappeared, she'd gone through pains not to let anyone squeeze her into that suddenly vacant role. Tuya still had bitter moments thinking about that time, not just their mother's absence but his sister's reaction to it. Mostly he's forgiven her. She was just a kid too then, dealing with her own grief and unprepared to walk anyone else through theirs. Now though, she's 17, next year, and beginning to settle into herself. Was she now prepared to fulfill the caretaker role she'd previously scorned? Natsuo is Natsuo, but even here his sense of humor feels more natural, less forced. Of all his siblings, Natsuo is the one he's closest to and respects the most. He's the one who's fought to rise above their circumstance the hardest, to not let Endeavor's cruelty smother his kindness and joy. He withstands the criticism and bullying aimed at him the best but is hurt the worst when he can't stand up for the rest of them. Tuya's not that selfless, not that strong, but Natsuo makes him wish he were. And all of this, as little of it as there has been, brought on by the presence of one frail, untested child. Izuku, who faints and runs screaming into the night from his nightmares and is quirkless and lies badly. Izuku, who is already so close to shattering from his own tragedy and cannot possibly shoulder the burden of theirs on top of it. Endeavor is going to ruin him. Somehow, someway, he'll destroy whatever it is about him that is inspiring them to be different or better or hopeful. They can't protect him, and Tuya is suddenly terrified that some of them will break themselves trying. What are you thinking about? Natsuo asks as they move Shudo's desk into the cleared space. This isn't going to last, he says. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows like this for long. Natsuo rolls his eyes. Then just stop and enjoy the sunshine and rainbows while they last, you damn emo. A week passes in the Todoroki household. Then another. Arataka Izuku learns how to spell his own name and fills 2 pages of a notebook practicing the kanji. The furniture and clothes arrive, and suddenly it's as if Izuku had always been there. He finds himself settling in quickly, if not always easily. His days are spent mostly following Shudo's lead. They wake up to a knock on the door rather than an alarm clock, eat a ridiculously formal breakfast, then go to morning training. BGMI alternates each day between martial arts and strength training on heavy days, and flexibility, balance, and coordination on light days. Shudo and Izuku are always opposite the older Todoroki siblings, working light routines while they work heavy and vice versa. Izuku doesn't think it should be called light days though, because there is absolutely nothing light about them. Heavy or light, Izuku always feels like he's going to die by the end of them. Still, he grins and says, "Yes, BGMI-sensei, and thank you, BGMI-sensei." Everyone insists it will get better, and he believes them, but that doesn't make his muscles hurt any less now or make him feel any less sick to his stomach. Then it's showers and change of clothes, the elder Todorokis head off to school, and Shudo and Izuku have lessons with Mr. Utagura. Their tutor is nice. Intense but nice. His opinion on public education is decidedly low, and so far he's spent more time unteaching Izuku old things than teaching him new things. But he seems to like Izuku and Shudo, calls them bright, clever boys and encourages questions in a way Izuku's never experienced in a classroom. There's more homework, but it doesn't feel like the tedious busy work he's familiar with but purposefully used to help them learn and absorb what they learn in a meaningful way. And it's fine, because there really isn't a lot to do when the elder Todorokis aren't available to entertain them. Junk food, television, video games, and the internet are all prohibited to Shudo and by extension Izuku per their draconian governess, a woman who insists Izuku call her Tano-san while his cousins referred to her as Aunt Hanako. "You're no relation of mine," she'd snapped and looked ready to say something else, but a quick glance at the other Todorokis glaring at her had made her think better of it. Even potentially wholesome activities like bike riding or swimming in any of the ponds that dotted the estate were met with distaste and offers of chores if they truly needed something to fill their time with. Izuku is tempted to say yes to those chores some days, particularly during the hour or so in the afternoon after lunch, when Shudo does leave his side to practice with his quirk in the cinderblock shed on the far end of the grounds. He'd asked to go watch the first time, but both Tano and the quirk trainer had said it was too dangerous and potentially distracting. So Izuku usually just takes a nap. When Shudo comes back, flushed from heat or cold or both, they have afternoon training with BGMI, which is even more hellish from their instructor's attention divided 2 ways instead of 5. Then they rest and wait for the others to show up, usually hiding from Tano on the ground somewhere. Sometimes they hold meetings for the secret All Might Hero Appreciation Society, taking Shudo's issues of Hero Weekly with them to read and quizzing each other from the trivia section or comparing heroes to see which ones Shudo likes best. Apparently, his cousin had never actually bothered to read his magazines. It is just something Endeavor had ordered for him. Sometimes, if Izuku's too tired to think, they take rice crackers to feed to the ducks and stick their bare feet in the koi pond, letting the fish nibble their toes. When the elder Todorokis appear, the two hang out with them or at least spend time in their rooms, playing on their smartphones and eating the junk food they sneak in past their governess while the others start their homework. Then a ridiculously elaborate dinner, and everyone slips away for an hour or 2 to study or just have some privacy, before they all go to bed before the sun has even set. It's days that are both too full and too long, where Izuku feels like a stranger, like he truly is Arataka Izuku, born yesterday, having never had a father or a mother, just an uncle he's only seen once and 4 cousins he already loves. But at night, on the edge of sleep and sometimes just before waking, he feels his mother's absence like a heart that's stopped beating. Some vital part of himself gone, and the rest of him gasping for breath. But only at night. In the day, there's nothing to remind him of who he was, what was lost. That doesn't mean his days are worry-free. Even putting aside the nightmare that is training, there is one matter that hangs over his head like a guillotine. Endeavor hasn't returned. Izuku assumes this means the man is busy looking for Hisashi, but Shudo tells him he is gone more often than not, days, sometimes weeks at a time. His first encounter with his uncle had given Izuku the impression of a proud but honorable man acting beyond the call of duty, nothing out of character for a renowned hero. But everything he hears from his cousins paint him a monster, and the idea of kindness being the motivation for Izuku's being taken in utterly impossible. Until he returns, the uncertainty holds him in a noose. It's his intention, no matter what, to stand up for himself. Even if he is hurt, even if he is killed. But with each passing day the possibility of being sent away feels like the more dreadful fate. He loves his cousins. He loves Shudo. They're the only family he has left, and being alone feels more frightening than death itself. I want to tell you something, but you have to promise not to laugh, Izuku says about a week into his stay. He'd thrown up during afternoon training and felt particularly feeble, and perhaps needing reassurance or feeling perversely masochistic, he'd decided to tell Shudo his dream. I won't laugh if it isn't funny. It's not funny to me. Then I won't laugh. Izuku takes a breath. I am going to be a pro-hero. Not I want to be a pro-hero, but I am going to be one. Arataka Izuku doesn't let his quirklessness hold him back. If he says he'll do something, he'll do it. How? Shudo says. It's not a disbelieving how could you possibly? It's a simple how will you? As certain of Izuku's words as Izuku himself had been. Perhaps more so. I honestly have no idea, but I've been thinking about it a long time. You know, before quirks, humans were still doing all sorts of amazing things. They built giant structures and microscopic machines and found cures for diseases and went to the moon. They did all these things without quirks, and people are still doing amazing things without using their quirks. It's a lot harder, but they're still doing them. I know, somehow, there is a way to be a pro-hero without a quirk. I never thought about it, Shudo says. I've been taught martial arts, but that was only to supplement fighting with a quirk. I don't know how anyone can fight against someone else's quirk without having a stronger or more versatile one of their own. Yeah. No one has figured out a way before. At least, not that I've heard of. But I've got at least 5 years to figure it out if I want to get into the U.Hero course. Even longer, if I try through a university program. Endeavor always emphasized the quirk made the hero, which is why he gave up on my brothers and sisters so quickly. But I always hoped he was wrong. They're both quiet for a long moment, then Shudo turns to him. I think you'll be a great hero. Izuku is so happy he thinks he could die. And then he wishes so badly he could tell his mom what Shudo said he thinks he will. Days march on, the heat of August days yielding to the cool of September nights, and still no Endeavor. When the guillotine drops, it's not his uncle's return that releases it. It's Tano standing on the veranda as Shudo and he head for the grounds after escaping Mr. Utagura for the day. She holds a small black suit in her arms. Too small to be for anyone other than Izuku. The funeral is tomorrow, she says coldly. And Arataka Izuku remembers he is also Midoriya Izuku.